I was driving back from the estate attorney's office, on cloud nine, ready to tell my son that my brother, who had no children of his own, had left me his entire farm and a bank account with a balance in the millions. But as I pulled up to the house, I heard the voices of my son Mason and my daughter-in-law Harper drifting out through the open window, and I froze. I was horrified, completely and utterly horrified, because what came out of that window weren't words of love or affection or anything resembling the family I thought we were. They were daggers. They were pure poison distilled into every single syllable. I stood there, paralyzed in my own front yard, the documents from the attorney trembling in my hands, while my entire world crumbled in a matter of seconds. Let me back up just a few minutes, because you need to understand the cruel irony of this moment. You need to understand that I had been floating, literally floating on a cloud of happiness that I hadn't felt in decades. I had just walked out of the estate attorney's office at 4:30 in the afternoon, and the sun was still shining with that golden October light that makes everything look like a movie. The lawyer, a serious man with thick glasses and a monotone voice, had spoken the words I never imagined I'd hear. "Miss Eleanor, your brother Arthur has left you everything in his will. The 500-acre farm, the main farmhouse, the arable land, and a bank account with a balance of $850,000. $850,000 at 68 years old. After a lifetime of breaking my back, sacrificing everything, living paycheck to paycheck, suddenly, out of nowhere, salvation, financial freedom, the end of all my worries. I signed the papers with shaking hands, shoved everything into a manila folder that I clutched to my chest as if it were the most valuable treasure in the universe, and walked out of there, feeling that for the first time in my existence, God was smiling at me. For the first time, after so much loss, so many tears, so much pain, something good was happening to me. Something huge. Something that would change everything. I drove the 20 minutes to my house with a goofy smile plastered on my face. I couldn't stop imagining the scene. I would arrive, open the door, find Mason and Harper in the living room, and tell them with feigned calm, "I have something to tell you." I imagined their faces full of curiosity. Then the revelation, the screams of joy, the hugs, the tears of happiness. My son lifting me off the ground like he did when he was young. Harper crying with emotion, that daughter-in-law I always treated like my own flesh and blood. The three of us hugging, planning the future, dreaming together. Finally, after 3 years of them living with me in my small house because they were in financial trouble, I could truly help them, buy them a house of their own, fund Mason's photography business, give Harper that trip she always mentioned, be the matriarch who rescues her family. The scent of honeysuckle drifted in through the car window, mixing with the smell of damp earth from the last rain. Everything seemed perfect, blessed, as if the universe were finally compensating for decades of suffering. Because I had suffered. God knows I had suffered. I was widowed at 30 with a 4-year-old boy in my arms. My husband died in a stupid accident, crushed by a truck that ran a stop sign. Overnight I was left alone, with no income, no plan, with a child who looked at me with those huge eyes, not understanding why Daddy wasn't coming home. And do you know what I did? I didn't crumble. I didn't give myself the luxury of crumbling. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously for years. I cleaned houses at 5 in the morning, worked retail from 8 to 4, and did alterations and sewing at night until my eyes closed from exhaustion. I slept 4 hours, if I was lucky. My hands were destroyed, rough as sandpaper, scarred by needles and cleaning chemicals. But Mason never went hungry. He never lacked for anything. I gave him an education, college, opportunities. I sold my mother's jewelry, the only pieces I had, to pay for his degree. I never remarried, even though I had suitors, because all my energy, all my love, all my time, I gave to him, only to him. When he met Harper 10 years ago, I thought my sacrifice had finally been worth it. She was an educated girl, sweet, who seemed to genuinely love him. She treated me well, called me on the phone, included me in their plans. When they got married 7 years ago, I cried tears of happiness at that wedding, which I financed myself by draining 3 years of savings. I thought, finally my son has a partner. Finally, he won't be alone when I'm gone. I helped them with the down payment on their first apartment. I bought them furniture. I paid for their honeymoon, all with a smile, because for me there was no greater joy than seeing them happy. 3 years ago, when they knocked on my door with suitcases and defeated faces because they had lost their jobs and couldn't pay rent, I opened my home without thinking twice. "Stay as long as you need," I told them. My house was small, modest, with a leaky roof and pipes that made strange noises, but it was theirs. I never charged them a cent, never asked them to contribute to the bills. On the contrary, I kept helping them with the little I had from my miserable Social Security check. I cooked for them, washed their clothes, tried to make life more bearable for them. Because that was me, a mother who sacrifices until her last breath. And now, with this $1 million inheritance, I could finally do everything I always dreamed of for them. Fix the house, buy them a new car, fund Mason's dreams, give Harper the comfortable life she deserved. My happiness was completely intertwined with theirs. That's what I thought as I parked my old sedan in front of the house. That's what I believed when I got out with my purse and that manila folder pressed tight against my chest. But then, something changed. A strange silence wrapped around me when I stepped onto the front lawn, a sensation in my stomach, like a primal warning, something my body knew before my mind did. The front door was ajar, as always. The living room window open, and from that window facing the front, voices drifted out. The voices of my son and my daughter-in-law. They were speaking in a tone I had never heard from them. Conspiratorial, urgent, cruel. I stopped 10 feet from the door. I don't know why. Something told me not to go in yet. To listen first. And then the words reached my ears with brutal clarity, as if the universe wanted to ensure I didn't miss a single syllable. "I can't take it anymore, Mason. I can't keep pretending I care about that old woman." It was Harper's voice, my sweet daughter-in-law, but it sounded different, filled with disdain, filled with hate. Every day that passes is more unbearable. Her constant complaining, her smell of mothballs, the way she chews her food. It makes me want to vomit. My heart stopped. I literally felt it stop in my chest. And the voice of my son, my Mason, the boy I carried in my womb, whom I nursed, whom I raised alone with blood and tears, responded with a dry laugh I had never heard before. "I know, babe. Believe me, I know. But we have to hold on a little longer. It's our house, technically. She's not going to live forever." The words came out of his mouth so naturally, so coldly, that I felt the ground opening up beneath my feet. My legs began to tremble. The manila folder slipped a little through my sweaty fingers, but I couldn't move. I was rooted there, like a tree with roots piercing the concrete, forced to listen to my own destruction. "A little longer?" Harper's voice rose in pitch, full of frustration. "Mason, it's been 3 years. 3 years of my life wasted, living with that woman who thinks she's a saint because she put a roof over our heads, as if we were begging for charity. This house should be ours, completely ours. Without her invading every space, without having to fake affection every damn morning. I'm sick of her repetitive stories about how much she suffered, how much she sacrificed. We know. We get it. But that doesn't make us her slaves forever." Every word was a direct punch to the gut. I felt nauseous. I felt the air turning dense, unbreathable. The scent of honeysuckle that seemed beautiful moments ago was now choking me. Invader? In my own house? The house I bought with the sweat of 3 simultaneous jobs? The house where I welcomed them with open arms when they didn't have a pot to piss in? "You're right," said Mason, and his agreement was worse than any direct insult. "But think about the practical side. If we kick her out now, we'll look like the villains to the whole family, to the neighbors. You know how people are. Besides, she has the deed to the house in her name. We can't do anything legally. But if we wait, if we are patient, when she goes, everything will be ours automatically. I'm an only child. There's no one else. And what if she takes years to die?" Harper's question sounded like they were discussing how long a package would take to arrive. Not my life, not my existence. "Your mother is like a cockroach, old, but resilient. She could live until she's 90. I'm not going to waste another 20 years of my life waiting. 20 years. They talked about my death as if it were a pending transaction, as if I were an obstacle between them and their happiness. The manila folder was shaking violently in my hands now. Inside were documents certifying $850,000, an entire estate, a brilliant future, and I had come running to share it with them, with these two people who, at this very moment, were planning how to get rid of me. "There are options," Mason said in a low voice, almost a whisper, but the afternoon silence carried his words directly to my ears as if he were screaming them. "Nursing homes aren't that expensive. I've been researching. There's one on the outskirts, halfway decent, for like $2,000 a month. We could tell her it's for her own good, that she can't take care of herself anymore, that we're worried she'll fall and break something being here alone all day." "But she's not alone all day. We're here." Harper's voice sounded confused. "That's why we'd have to get jobs first, right? To have the perfect excuse. Mom, we can't take care of you anymore because we work all day. It's for your safety." The way he imitated a worried, loving voice made me feel a disgust so deep I had to cover my mouth with my hand to not vomit right there in the yard. "You're a genius," Harper laughed, and her laugh sounded genuinely amused, as if my son had just told the best joke in the world. $2,000 a month is nothing compared to getting our privacy back. We could remodel her room, turn it into an office for you, or a walk-in closet for me. God knows I need it. And finally, we could have the house how we want it, without her horrible ceramic knickknacks everywhere, without her crocheted doilies on every piece of furniture. The doilies I crocheted by hand for years, on those endless nights after doing alterations for others, because I wanted my house to look nice despite being poor. The ceramic figurines I bought one by one at flea markets, on my days off, because it was the only thing I could afford to decorate with. All that I had built with so much love, reduced to garbage in their eyes. And what about her Social Security? The true interest. It had always been about the money. If we put her in a home, could we keep part of her check? I mean, we'd be paying for the place. Technically, we'd be taking care of her. Her check is a pittance, like $1,200 a month. It would barely cover half the nursing home. Mason sounded disappointed, as if he were doing mental math and the numbers didn't add up. "But once she's there, we could sell some of her furniture, her things. That antique dresser in her room must be worth something, and she has some jewelry stored away, I think." "I didn't have jewelry. I sold it all decades ago to pay for his damn college tuition. But they didn't even know that. I never told them the details of my sacrifices because I didn't want them to feel indebted to me. How stupid I was. How incredibly stupid." "The problem is convincing her," Harper said, and I could picture her biting her lower lip like she did when she was thinking. "She's stubborn. She's going to say she's perfectly fine, that she can take care of herself. She's going to cry, make us feel guilty with her stories of sacrifice. That's why we have to be strategic." Mason's voice took on a calculating tone that froze my blood. "We start, little by little. We point out her memory lapses, her little confusions. Mom, you already told me that story 3 times today. Are you okay? Mom, you left the stove on again. It's dangerous." Even if it's not true, we make her doubt herself. And when she's insecure enough, we present the nursing home as the only logical option. Gaslighting. My own son was planning to gaslight me, to convince me I was losing my mind, to psychologically manipulate me until I broke. Tears began to roll down my cheeks. Hot, bitter, silent. But I didn't make a sound. I couldn't make a sound. I had to hear everything. I had to know exactly what these two people I loved with all my being had turned into. "And if she resists anyway?" Harper's question floated in the air. There was a silence. A long, heavy silence that lasted maybe 5 seconds, but felt like an eternity. And then Mason spoke, and his words were the final stab. "Then we wait. Nature takes its course. And let's be honest, if she got seriously ill, it's not like we're going to spend a fortune on treatments. She's lived her life. She's had her years." "You're right," Harper sighed, as if they had just solved a complicated math problem. "Either way, in a few years this solves itself. And in the meantime, we keep smiling and enduring." My knees almost gave out. I had to lean against the porch column to keep from falling to the ground. The world spun around me in a nauseating spiral of betrayal and pain. These two people, my son and my daughter-in-law, were discussing my death like someone discussing the dinner menu, with that same coldness, with that same indifference. And the worst, The absolute worst is that I had literally come skipping with joy to share with them a fortune that would change our lives. A fortune I planned to use primarily to help them, to give them everything they hadn't been able to have. The irony was so cruel it almost made me laugh. Almost. If it weren't for the fact that I felt like they were ripping my heart out with their bare hands, I might have found some twisted humor in the situation. Here I was, with certified documents for $850,000 in my purse, listening to how they planned to stick me in a cheap nursing home and keep my miserable $1,200 Social Security check. If they knew. If they only knew what I was holding. But they weren't going to know. Not yet. Because something inside me, something primal and fierce that I didn't know I possessed, had just awakened. Well, enough talking about your mother, Harper said with a lighter tone, as if they had just finished discussing the weather. What do you want for dinner? Because I am not cooking. Let her do it when she gets here. That's what she's good for, right? At least let her earn her keep. They laughed. Both of them laughed. And that sound, those shared cackles at the expense of my humiliation, finally broke something fundamental inside me. For 68 years I had been Eleanor the good, Eleanor the self-sacrificing, Eleanor the forgiving, the understanding, the one who always puts others first. The one who worked until she destroyed her body so her son could have a future. The one who never asked for anything in return because a mother's love is supposed to be unconditional, selfless, eternal. But in that moment, standing in my own front yard, listening to the two people I loved most in the world plan to discard me like trash, something changed. A chemical, molecular, spiritual transformation. The sweet and understanding Eleanor died right there. And in her place, someone new was born, someone cold, someone calculating, someone who had just learned that boundless kindness is just another form of being stupid. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with that air that now tasted like ash. I adjusted the manila folder under my arm. I checked my reflection in the car window. Red eyes, yes, but nothing a little cold water couldn't hide. I needed to walk into that house as if I hadn't heard a thing. I needed to act. And for the first time in my life, acting didn't mean being authentic and honest, but being the best liar in the world. I walked toward the door with measured, controlled steps. I inserted the key with hands that no longer trembled with emotion, but with an icy fury that ran through my veins like mercury. I opened the door and closed it with the usual sound. Not too loud, not too soft. "I'm home," I yelled with the most cheerful voice I could manufacture. That loving mother voice I had perfected over decades. I heard them moving in the living room. Hurried footsteps, whispers. When I entered the shared space, there they were. Mason on the ivory sofa I bought myself 10 years ago, Harper in the armchair, both with their phones in their hands, the perfect picture of domestic innocence. They greeted me with smiles, wide, warm, completely fake smiles. And I, who now knew the truth, could see the lie behind every forced facial muscle. "Mom, how did it go?" Mason stood up and walked toward me with open arms. My son, my baby, the boy I nursed, whom I cured when he had chickenpox, whom I taught to ride a bike, whom I consoled when his first love rejected him. That same boy was now a stranger with my son's face, approaching to give me a hug I knew he didn't feel. I hugged him. God, how hard it was to hug him, feeling his arms around me, his familiar smell of that cheap cologne he used, and knowing that minutes before he was planning how to get rid of me. But I did it. I endured, because I needed them to believe everything was normal. "Good, son. Everything is good." My voice came out surprisingly steady. Years of hiding pain had trained me for this without knowing it. "And you guys? How was your day?" Quiet. Harper stood up too, approached, and gave me a peck on the cheek. Her perfume, the one I gave her for her last birthday because she mentioned she liked it, hit me like a punch. We were looking at some stuff online, planning some ideas for Mason's business, planning how to lock me up in a home. That's what they were planning. But I smiled. "That's great, honey. I'm glad you're being productive." The word honey almost choked me. I had called this woman my daughter for 7 years. I treated her better than many mothers treat their own biological daughters. And she called me a cockroach when she thought I wasn't listening. "Do you want me to make you some tea, Mom? You look tired." Mason looked at me with that expression of concern that I now knew was pure theater. He was probably already practicing for when he would start his plan to make me think I was losing my mind. No thanks. Sweetheart, I'm fine. I sat in my favorite chair, that wooden rocker I rescued from a flea market, and restored myself. I set my purse to the side, careful that the manila folder wasn't visible. They didn't ask what was inside. They didn't ask why I had gone to the lawyer. They didn't even remember that today was my appointment. Of course not. I was just the old piece of furniture in the living room, present but invisible. Mom. Harper started with that sweet voice I now recognized as completely fabricated. I was thinking that tomorrow we could go to the mall together. Spend some quality time. It's been a long time since we went out. Just you and me. Quality time. With the woman who half an hour ago said my mothball smell made her want to vomit. I would love that, Harper. That would be very nice. The words came out of my mouth as if someone else were saying them. As if I were an actress following a script. I watched them for the next hour. I really watched them, as if seeing them for the first time. Mason was 39, but he had never fully matured. He still had that teenage attitude, expecting things to fall from the sky. His photography business, which he talked about constantly, was more of a fantasy than a reality. He had taken maybe 20 jobs in 3 years. But I always encouraged him. Always told him it was just a matter of time, of effort. Now I realized I had spoiled him. I gave him so much, forgave him so much, that he never learned the real value of things, nor respect for the person who gave them to him. And Harper, 36, pretty in a conventional way, with that long brown hair she cared for religiously, and those nails always perfect despite not working. How did I not see the shallowness before? How did I not notice that every conversation we had ended up revolving around material things, what she didn't have, what she wanted? When she lost her job 3 years ago, I consoled her. Don't worry, honey, something better will come along. But nothing ever came, because she never looked for anything. She got comfortable in my house, eating my food, enjoying my hospitality, and began to see me not as a blessing but as an obstacle. We ate dinner together that night. I cooked, as always. I made chicken parmesan with spaghetti, one of Mason's favorite dishes. I set the table. I served. I watched them eat what I prepared with my hands while they chatted about a show they were binging, about a friend who posted vacation photos, about absolute trivialities. They didn't ask about my day. They didn't ask what I had done. I was the service staff, not part of the family. After dinner, I washed the dishes while they settled back into the living room. I heard their laughter, the sound of the TV, that domestic normality that now seemed obscene to me. My hands moved automatically, scrubbing every plate, every glass, while my brain processed everything I had heard. $850,000 were waiting in a bank account with my name on it. An entire farm I could sell or manage, and they didn't have the slightest clue. I dried my hands with the kitchen towel and stared out the window toward the backyard. Night had fallen completely, and only the dark silhouettes of the trees swaying in the breeze were visible. I remembered all the times I worked in that garden, planting flowers, pulling weeds, trying to create a beautiful space despite our economic situation. I remembered the mornings I watered the plants before leaving to clean other people's houses, thinking that at least my family would have a cozy home to return to. How naive, how stupidly naive. My mind began to work in a new way, calculating, cold. If they could plan, so could I. If they could fake love while conspiring behind my back, I could fake ignorance while assembling my own strategy. But first I needed to confirm something. I needed to make sure that what I heard wasn't an isolated conversation, a moment of frustration that didn't reflect their true feelings. Although deep down I knew the truth. No one speaks with that level of detail, with that specific coldness, if it's just a momentary venting. That night I went to sleep early, as always. I'm tired, kids. I'll leave you watching your show. I said goodbye with kisses on the forehead for both, and they barely looked up from the screen. I went up the stairs to my room, that small room on the second floor that had been mine since we bought this house 20 years ago. I sat on the edge of my bed and took the manila folder out of my purse. There were all the documents, the deed to the farm in my name, the bank papers certifying the account balance. The testamentary letter from my brother Arthur, written in his own hand 2 months before dying, explaining why he left me everything. Because you were the only one who was always there when I needed you, even though you never asked for anything. Because I admire you more than anyone in this world. Because you deserve something good after so much suffering. Tears began to fall on the paper, smudging the ink. My brother, that quiet and solitary man, knew me better than my own son knew me. I put the documents in the back of my closet, under a pile of old sweaters they never checked because they didn't care enough to snoop through my things. I lay in the dark with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in decades, I allowed resentment to flow freely through my veins. I didn't repress it. I didn't rationalize it. I didn't look for excuses to justify their behavior. I just felt it, pure and burning. I remembered the day Mason was born, 39 years ago. It was a difficult birth, 23 hours of labor. When they finally put him in my arms, crying and wrinkled, I swore I would do everything for him. Everything. And I kept that promise to the point of losing myself in the process. I never went back to school, even though I had dreamed of being a teacher. I never pursued my own dreams because all my energy went into funding his. I never gave myself permission to be selfish, not even for a moment. And for what? To raise a man who planned to lock me in a cheap nursing home and keep my $1,200 pension. A man who had calculated how much my antique dresser would be worth. A man who literally said he wouldn't spend money on treatments if I got seriously ill because I had already lived my life. The rage I felt in that moment was different from anything I had experienced before. It wasn't hot or explosive. It was cold, dense, heavy as lead. It settled in my chest and stayed there, slowly transforming into something more useful. Determination. If they could be cruel, I could be relentless. If they could plan my end, I could plan their awakening. Not their death, of course. I wasn't like them. But certainly their reality check. Their moment of truth. Their downfall. The next 3 days were an acting exercise that deserved an award. I got up every morning and played my role of loving mother with surgical precision. I made breakfasts. I cleaned the house. I washed their clothes. I smiled when they talked to me. I nodded when they told me their insignificant plans. And all the while, behind my eyes, there was a machine calculating, measuring, planning. I observed them like a scientist observes specimens in a lab. I noticed how Harper spoke to me with that exaggerated sweetness people use when trying to manipulate someone they considered dumb. I noticed how Mason asked about my health with a new insistence, probably already starting his strategy to make me doubt myself. "Did you sleep well, Mom? I heard you get up 3 times to go to the bathroom last night. Are you sure you're okay?" I never got up 3 times. He was lying, planting seeds of confusion. On the 4th day, I made a decision. I couldn't go on like this indefinitely, living in this farce, pretending I didn't know what I knew. I needed to confirm just how far their betrayal went, and I needed to do it in a way that gave me absolute advantage. So I did something I had never done in my life. I acted with cunning. That afternoon, I announced I would go visit my friend Linda, who lived on the other side of town. "I'll probably be back late, don't wait up." This was unusual. I almost never went out at night. I saw how they looked at each other, how their eyes lit up with that barely disguised joy of having the house to themselves. I left with my purse and drove to the corner. I parked the car on the parallel street, where they couldn't see it from the house, and stealthily walked back. I entered through the back garden door, the one we never used and that I knew they wouldn't lock. I stayed in the kitchen, in the shadows, completely still, barely breathing. I didn't have to wait long. Within 15 minutes they started talking, this time without whispers, without precautions, with the confidence of someone who believes they are completely alone. "Thank God she left," Harper said with a dramatic sigh. I couldn't stand another minute of pretending. My face hurts from smiling so much. "I know, babe, but you're doing great." Mason's voice sounded proud. "In a few more weeks we start phase 2 of the plan. I've already investigated 3 facilities. The cheapest one is on the outskirts, like I told you. $2,000 a month. With her Social Security, it almost covers it. And when will we tell her?" Harper sounded anxious, like a child waiting to open Christmas presents. "Soon, But first, I need her to sign some papers. My blood ran cold. There's a lawyer a friend recommended. He says I can get her to sign a power of attorney claiming it's to make things easier for her, so I can handle paperwork for her because at her age, it's complicated. Once I have that power, I can sell the house without her realizing it until it's too late. Sell my house. The house I bought with years of work. The house whose deed was in my name. They planned to legally defraud me, strip me of the only thing I had, and leave me in a nursing home with the bare minimum. The level of their betrayal had no bottom. You're brilliant. Harper laughed. And she'll sign just like that. She trusts me blindly. She would never question anything I asked her. The arrogance in his voice made me clench my fists until my nails dug into my palms. She's spent her whole life being the self-sacrificing martyr. She's too good for her own good. Too stupid. Stupid. My son called me stupid. That word echoed in my head like a church bell. Stupid. All those sleepless nights working to pay for his college. Stupid. All those times I skipped meals so he could eat well. Stupid. All those years sacrificing every personal desire, every dream, every chance at happiness. Stupid. Kindness interpreted as weakness. Unconditional love interpreted as naivety. I wasn't stupid. I was a mother who loved too much, someone who never deserved it. And what if she refuses to sign? Harper asked. And I could hear the noise of her moving on the sofa, probably cuddling up against my son like she always did. She won't refuse. But if she does, there's plan B. The lawyer also explained that I can claim senile dementia, get a couple of witnesses to say she's losing her memory, that she can't make decisions for herself. With that, I can request legal guardianship. It's more complicated and takes longer, but it works. Every word coming out of his mouth was a revelation of how far he was willing to go. My son was willing to destroy my reputation, to make me look like a demented old woman in front of authorities and acquaintances, just to steal what was mine. And wouldn't it be easier if she just died? Harper's question came out so naturally, like someone asking if it wouldn't be easier to order takeout instead of cooking. She wasn't really suggesting it, I know, but the fact that she could pronounce those words with such lightness showed me the abyss of her indifference toward my life. There was a silence that lasted too long. And then Mason spoke, and although his words were different from what Harper insinuated, the tone was just as chilling. Don't say that even as a joke. But honestly, sometimes I think it would be a relief for everyone. She's already old. She's completed her cycle. And we are in the prime of our lives, stuck taking care of someone who only drags us down. Drags us down. Me, who gave them a roof for free. Me, who cooked for them. Me, who paid the utility bills without asking them for a cent of contribution. I was dragging them down. The distortion of reality was so grotesque, it almost made me laugh. Almost. You're right. Sorry. Harper sighed. It's just that I'm so tired of all this. I want our life back. I want to be able to walk naked through the house if I feel like it without worrying that the old lady will show up. I want to decorate how I want, invite friends over, without having to warn them that there's a bitter old woman living here. I want privacy, freedom, space. Soon, babe. I promise you, soon. I heard the sound of a kiss. They were kissing while talking about discarding me, and that mental image was so repulsive I had to swallow the bile that rose in my throat. When are you going to ask her to sign the power of attorney? Harper asked after a moment. This week. I already have the documents. The lawyer prepared them with complicated technical language, so she doesn't really understand what she's signing. I'm going to tell her it's to help her with banking, so I can better assist her with her finances. She has no idea about laws. She'll sign without reading. The confidence in his voice was overwhelming. He really thought he knew me. He really thought he could manipulate me so easily. What he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I had been married to a lawyer before he died. My late husband, Mason's father, taught me a lot about laws and contracts during our years together. He taught me to read the fine print, to never sign anything without understanding it completely, to protect myself legally. Ironic that the father's lessons were going to protect me from the son. You're so smart, Harper cooed, and the tone of admiration in her voice toward someone planning to defraud his own mother made me nauseous. And after selling the house, what will we do with the money? First, we pay off all our debts. We owe like $20,000 in credit cards. $20,000. I had no idea they had those debts. They never asked me for help. Then we buy a small condo for us, something modern in a good area. With what's left, we can travel, buy a decent car, finally live well. And your mother in the nursing home for $2,000 a month? The question had a hint of guilt, barely perceptible. She'll be fine. She'll have a roof, food, basic care. It's more than many have at her age. The way he justified the abandonment, as if he were doing me a favor, as if locking me in the cheapest option while they lived off my house money was an act of generosity, made me understand something fundamental. My son wasn't just selfish or immature, he was cruel. There was an inherent cruelty in his character that I never wanted to see because motherly love blinded me. "I guess you're right," Harper said, though she didn't sound completely convinced. "I just hope she doesn't make a scene when we tell her." "She won't. I know her. She'll cry. Yes. She'll say we're abandoning her, that after everything she did for me, she'll do her little victim act. But in the end, she'll accept it because she has no other choice. She has no money of her own. She has nowhere to go. She has no real friends who can help her. She is completely alone in the world except for us." The way he analyzed my loneliness, my vulnerability, as if they were tools to be used against me, showed me a level of sociopathy I didn't know existed in him. But he was wrong. He was wrong about everything. I had $850,000. I had a farm. I had options he couldn't even imagine. And above all, I now had something I had never had before. Absolute clarity about who my son really was. I moved away from the kitchen as silently as I had arrived. I went out the back door and walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and just stayed there, in the dark, processing everything. I didn't cry. I had no tears left for them. In their place, I felt something more powerful: resolution. I drove aimlessly for an hour, organizing my thoughts. I needed a perfect plan. I couldn't just confront them yet. I needed timing. I needed to maximize the impact. I needed to make sure they fully understood the magnitude of what they had lost. And above all, I needed to protect myself legally, so they couldn't hurt me even after everything exploded. The next morning I called the attorney. "I need to update my will urgently." The lawyer, the same man with thick glasses who had given me the news of the inheritance, received me that same afternoon. I explained the situation without going into emotional details. Just facts. He listened with a neutral expression and then nodded. "I understand perfectly, Miss Eleanor. Unfortunately, I see cases like this more often than I'd like." He drafted a new will, specifying that my son Mason was completely disinherited. Everything, absolutely everything, would go to a charity foundation helping single mothers in vulnerable situations. Women like I had been decades ago. I signed every page with cold satisfaction. "I also need you to prepare a legal document revoking any authority anyone else might try to obtain over my assets or medical decisions," I told him. The lawyer prepared the corresponding papers. Everything was certified, sealed, legal, and irrevocable. "Is there anything else I can do for you?" the lawyer asked when we finished. "Yes, I need you to recommend a good real estate agent. I'm going to sell my current house." His expression remained professional, but I saw a glint of approval in his eyes. He gave me 3 names of reliable agents. That night, I arrived home later than usual. Mason and Harper were eating dinner they had ordered for delivery, because of course, neither of them cooked. They looked at me with surprise when I entered. "Mom, where were you? You had us worried." The lie came out of Mason's mouth so fluidly. Worried. Surely they were worried I had died and ruined their plans to rob me while I was still breathing. "I had some matters to resolve, son. Adult things." I said it with a sweet smile, but I emphasized the word adult as a reminder that I was the owner of this house and my own life. Even though they seemed to have forgotten, the following days were a masterpiece of strategic patience. Every morning I got up with a renewed purpose. While they slept in late, I was in contact with real estate agents, lawyers, accountants. I organized every detail of my new life as if I were assembling a complex puzzle where every piece had to fit perfectly. I visited the farm I inherited from Arthur, that beautiful land 2 hours from the city, with a main farmhouse that needed repairs but had incredible potential. I hired a manager to start working the land. I opened new bank accounts. I met with a financial advisor who almost fell off his chair when I told him the amount I needed to invest. Miss Eleanor, with this amount, and at your age, you can live very comfortably for the rest of your life without worries, the advisor told me. A young man in a gray suit who treated me with a respect I hadn't received in my own home for years. We can create a diversified portfolio that generates passive monthly income of at least $4,000, maybe $5,000 if we're conservative. $4,000 a month, while my son planned to rob me to keep my $1,200. The irony made me smile at the most unexpected moments. Sometimes I caught myself smiling while washing dishes or folding laundry, and Mason would ask me what was so funny. "Nothing, son. I'm just happy," I would answer. And it was true. I was happy. Happy in a dark and vindictive way, but happy nonetheless. The real estate agent I hired to sell my house was an efficient woman named Sarah, about 50, with that unstoppable energy of someone who loves her job. She came to evaluate the property on a Tuesday afternoon, when Mason and Harper had supposedly gone out to look for work, although I knew they were probably in a coffee shop spending the little money they had while waiting to steal mine. "It's a charming property, Miss Eleanor," Sarah said, walking through the rooms with her tablet in hand, taking notes and photos. "The location is excellent. The size is perfect for a young family. With some minor repairs, we could put it on the market for $320,000, maybe up to $350,000 if we find the right buyer." $320,000. The house I bought 20 years ago for $80,000, working like a slave, was now worth 4 times more, and my son planned to sell it out from under me, keep the money, and stick me in a dump of a nursing home. The rage I felt was so intense I had to sit down. "Are you okay?" Sarah approached with genuine concern. Yes, I'm just emotional. This house has a lot of memories." I wasn't lying. It had memories, some good, from when Mason was a child and still genuinely loved me, when we played in the yard and he hugged me before sleeping, and recent horrible memories of betrayal and cruelty. I understand perfectly. Selling a house is always an emotional process. Sarah patted me on the shoulder. "But I assure you we will find the perfect family for this place. When do you want to list it?" "As soon as possible. Let's say in 2 weeks. I needed that time to coordinate everything else, to ensure that when the hammer fell, it fell with deadly precision." "Perfect. I'll prepare all the documents." Sarah left with her tablet full of photos and measurements, leaving me alone in the house that soon would no longer be mine, but soon would also no longer be theirs. That night Mason finally made his move. I arrived from running errands and found him in the living room with a folder of documents on the coffee table. He had that rehearsed, serious expression, like an actor about to deliver his big monologue. "Mom, I need to speak with you about something important." He sat on the sofa and motioned for me to sit next to him. Harper appeared from the kitchen with 2 cups of tea, one for him and one for me, with that Judas smile. "Sure, son, tell me." I sat down and took the cup of tea, feigning absolute innocence. "Look, I've been thinking a lot about your situation." He began with that voice of feigned concern I now recognized perfectly. "You're getting older, and managing your finances must be getting complicated. The banks, the paperwork, all that bureaucracy. So I consulted with a lawyer, and he suggested that maybe it would be a good idea for you to give me power of attorney to help you with those things." Power of attorney. I acted confused, tilting my head like an old woman who doesn't understand complicated terms. "Yes, Mom. It's just a document that allows me to handle banking and legal matters for you, to make your life easier. That way, you don't have to be going to banks, signing complicated papers. I take care of everything." The smile he gave me was the same one he used when he was a child and wanted to convince me to buy him a toy. "Oh, how considerate of you, son." I took the folder and began to review the documents. They were exactly what I expected. A broad power of attorney that would give him total control over all my properties, bank accounts, and financial decisions. In other words, carte blanche to rob me legally. It's a bit technical, Mom. Don't worry about understanding everything. Basically, it just says, "I can help you with your things." Mason tried to take the papers from my hands, but I gripped them tighter. No, no, let me read. Your father always told me never to sign anything without reading it completely. I saw him tense up. The mention of his father, my late husband, always made him uncomfortable because deep down he knew his father would have been deeply disappointed in him. I read every word carefully while Mason and Harper watched me with growing impatience. The document was drafted deceptively, using complicated legal language to hide the fact that I would basically be stripping myself of all control over my own life. This says you could sell my properties without my consent, I said, pointing to a specific clause. No, no, Mom. That's only in case of emergency, if you couldn't make decisions for yourself. The lie came out so smooth. He had perfected the art of deception. And this part about you being able to make medical decisions for me. I pointed to another section. It's for your protection, Mom. Imagine you're in the hospital and can't communicate. Someone has to be able to decide for you. Harper intervened with that sweet, poisonous voice. I looked at both of them. I saw the anxiety in their eyes, the barely contained greed. They wanted me to sign right there, in that moment, before I could think too much or consult anyone else. And for a second, a single second, I considered signing the document just to see their faces when they discovered I had nothing to steal because I had already moved everything. But no, I had a better plan. You know what, son? You're right. This seems very useful. I saw them relax, exchanging looks of victory. But let me take it to my own lawyer so he can explain it to me better, just to be sure I understand everything. The mask cracked for an instant. Your lawyer? Mom, you don't need to spend money on a lawyer. I already consulted with one. I know, son. But your father always said that in legal matters, it's better to have a second opinion. Don't worry. It's not mistrust toward you. It's just caution. I smiled with all the sweetness in the world as I put the documents back in the folder. But, Mom, Mason tried to protest. It's decided. I'll take it tomorrow to the estate attorney who helped me with your Uncle Arthur's inheritance papers. I dropped that information casually like a bomb. I had avoided mentioning the inheritance for days, waiting for the perfect moment. The change in atmosphere was instant. Mason and Harper went rigid as statues. Inheritance? What inheritance? Mason's voice sounded sharp, almost hysterical. Oh, I hadn't told you? I acted surprised. Your Uncle Arthur left me some things when he died. I've been resolving the paperwork with the attorney these past weeks. That's why I've been out so much lately. What things did he leave you? Harper leaned forward, and the greed in her eyes was so obvious it almost made me laugh. Oh, well, the old farm he had in the country. You know, that dilapidated property that almost no one visited. I said it with a dismissive tone, as if it were worthless. And some money in the bank. Not much, just some savings. How much money? Mason didn't even try to hide his interest anymore. He had leaned forward, hands clenched on his knees, eyes shining with that avarice I could now see with crystal clarity. I'm not sure exactly. The lawyer told me an amount, but you know how I am with numbers. I touched my temple with a gesture of adorable confusion. I think he said something about 80,000, or maybe it was 18,000. Honestly, I don't remember well. I'd have to check the papers. The lie rolled off my tongue with an ease that surprised me. Decades of absolute honesty. And now I was lying as if I had been practicing my whole life. I saw them processing the information. $80,000 wasn't a fortune, but it wasn't a little bit of money either. Enough to pique their interest, but not enough for them to suspect I was hiding something bigger. Harper and Mason exchanged one of those couple looks that communicate without words, and I could read exactly what they were thinking. We need that money. Mom, that's wonderful. Mason stood up and hugged me, and the physical contact gave me chills. I'm so happy for you. Uncle Arthur was a good man. Yes, he was. Much better than his nephew, I thought. But I just smiled, and well, with that money you could do a lot of things. Harper joined the conversation with that honeyed voice she used when she wanted something. You could fix up the house, take that trip you've always wanted, or, she paused calculatedly, or you could help Mason and me with the down payment on our condo. You know, we've been looking for a place of our own. There it was. They didn't take 5 minutes to ask for money. They didn't even wait a day to pretend they were happy for me. Immediately, they thought of how they could benefit. Oh, I don't know, honey. I still have to see exactly how much it is and what I'm going to do with it. I played indecisive, the confused old lady who doesn't know how to handle money. Plus there's the farm. The lawyer says I could sell it, but I don't know if anyone would want to buy that old land. I could help you with that, Mom. Mason practically jumped at the offer. I could research buyers, handle the sale for you. It would be easier if you give me that power of attorney I showed you. That way I can do all the paperwork without bothering you. Of course, now the power of attorney wasn't just to rob me of the little they thought I had, but to steal the inheritance too. They wanted total control of everything. The magnitude of their greed knew no bounds. Let me think about it, son. It's all very recent, very overwhelming. I yawned exaggeratedly. I'm tired. I'm going to sleep. I got up with the folder of documents under my arm and went up the stairs to my room. From upstairs, I heard them speaking in urgent whispers. I lowered the volume of the TV I had left on in my room and pressed my ear to the door to hear better. This changes everything. Harper's voice sounded excited. If she has $80,000 plus the sale of the farm, we're talking about much more money than we thought. I know, but we have to be careful. She can't suspect anything. Mason sounded anxious but controlled. I'm going to investigate how much that farm is really worth. If it is where I think it is, it could easily be worth $200,000 or more. And do you think she'll give us the money if we ask for it? Harper doubted. Not all of it. She's stingy. She's always been stingy. She'll say she needs to save some for emergencies, for her old age. That's why I need her to sign that power of attorney. Once I have it, I can sell everything without her noticing until it's too late. I'll tell her the prices were lower than expected, that there were legal fees, that little was left after taxes. She knows nothing about those things. Stingy. He called me stingy. The woman who spent every last cent on him for decades, who drained her savings multiple times to help him, who worked until she got sick to give him everything. Stingy. But we have to act fast, continued Mason, before someone else gets into her head. Before that lawyer suggests she do something different with the money. Tomorrow I'm going to pressure her to sign. I'm going to tell her the lawyer needs the document urgently, that if we don't do it soon, there will be legal problems with the inheritance. Perfect. I'm going to take her shopping tomorrow. I'll keep her distracted, tired. When she gets home, she'll be so exhausted she'll sign whatever you put in front of her. Harper laughed. And that sound pierced me like a knife. This woman I treated like a daughter was deliberately planning to exhaust me, to manipulate me. You're brilliant, babe. Another kiss. More sounds of affection between two people conspiring against me. In 2 weeks, all this will be ours. The house, the inheritance money, everything. And she's going to be in that nursing home without knowing what happened. I moved away from the door and sat on my bed. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or sadness, from anticipation, from power, because they didn't know I knew. They didn't know that every word they uttered was only digging their grave deeper. They didn't know the money was already protected, that the house was about to be sold, that I had changed my will, that I had everything documented with lawyers and notaries. That night I barely slept. Not from anxiety, but from the pure adrenaline of knowing I was about to teach them the most important lesson of their lives. I stayed awake planning every detail of the final moment, that instant when I would reveal everything to them. It had to be perfect. It had to be devastating. It had to leave them without words, without excuses, without an exit. The next morning, Harper appeared in my room early, with a radiant smile. Good morning, Mom. How about today you and I go shopping? It's been so long since we spent time together, just the two of us. Oh, what a nice gesture, honey. I smiled with all the innocence I could manufacture. I'd love that. We had breakfast, the three of us together. A breakfast she prepared for the first time in months. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, all served with smiles and polite conversation. Mason asked me how I had slept, if I felt well, if I needed anything. The acting was so transparent now that I knew their true intentions, that it was hard not to laugh in their faces. Harper took me to the mall in her car. On the way, she talked nonstop about trivial things, keeping me entertained, establishing that false intimacy. We walked through stores for hours. She made me try on clothes she knew I would never buy, showed me expensive shoes, took me from one place to another until my feet genuinely started to hurt. Tired, Mom? she asked with that feigned concern when she saw me sitting on a bench in the mall. A little, yes. I don't have the energy I used to. I let my voice sound weak, fragile, letting her believe her plan was working. Poor thing. Let's go home so you can rest. She took my arm with that condescending delicacy used with the elderly, and we walked slowly toward the parking lot. In the car, while driving back, Harper began her real work. You know, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday regarding your brother's inheritance. Yes. I played distracted, looking out the window. It's a big responsibility to handle that much money at your age. Doesn't it scare you a little? I mean, with so many scammers out there, so many bad people who take advantage of seniors. Her voice dripped with false concern. I hadn't thought about that. I let a touch of anxiety color my voice. Do you think someone might try to rob me? It's possible, Mom. That's why I think it would be a good idea for you to let Mason help you. He's young, he understands these modern things, he knows how to protect money, and above all, he's your son. You can trust him completely. The words came out of her mouth with such conviction that for a moment I wondered if she really believed what she was saying, if she had rationalized her betrayal so much that she genuinely thought they were doing the right thing. I suppose you're right. I sighed as if I were considering it seriously. It's just that I'm a little scared to sign papers I don't fully understand. That's why you have to trust your family, Mom. We would never hurt you. We love you. She held my hand while driving, and the contact of her skin against mine gave me nausea. Those same hands that held me with fake affection had been planning my exile to a cheap nursing home. I looked out the car window while she kept talking, trying to convince me with sweet words and well-rehearsed lies. The streets passed quickly. The same streets I had traversed thousands of times over decades, coming and going from exhausting jobs, always thinking of giving my son a better future. And now that son saw me as an obstacle, as something disposable. When we got home, Mason was waiting in the living room with the same documents from the day before, but this time he had brought a mobile notary, a small man with a briefcase who introduced himself as Mr. Thompson. Mom, I'm glad you guys are here. Look, Mr. Thompson came so we can make the power of attorney official right today. That way you don't have to worry about anything anymore. Mason sounded excited, urgent. Mr. Thompson was a man of about 50, thin, with wire-rimmed glasses and a brown suit that had seen better days. He had that neutral expression of someone who has notarized thousands of documents without really caring about the content of any. He opened his briefcase and took out an official stamp, ink, and several additional sheets. Good afternoon, ma'am. He extended his hand with professional courtesy. Your son hired me to come certify some documents. It's a quick process. It won't take more than 10 minutes. How kind of you to come all the way here. I shook his hand and sat in my favorite rocking chair, acting like the tired old lady who had just arrived from an exhausting day of shopping. May I see the documents first? Mason tensed visibly. Mom, they're the same ones I showed you yesterday. Mr. Thompson is in a hurry. He has other clients waiting. There's no rush, Mason. Mr. Thompson passed me the documents with a professional smile. The lady has every right to review what she is going to sign. In fact, it is my obligation to ensure she understands completely. I saw Mason clench his fists. His plan was getting complicated. I took the papers and began to read them slowly, very slowly, running my finger along every line as if I needed help following the text. The silence in the living room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. This says my son would have total control over all my bank accounts, I said after a moment, pointing to a specific clause. That is correct, ma'am. It is a general power of attorney. Mr. Thompson nodded. And could he sell my house without consulting me? Technically, yes, if the document is signed as currently drafted. The notary kept his neutral tone, but I saw a glint of something in his eyes, maybe discomfort, maybe suspicion. I see. I kept reading. And medical decisions? He could decide to commit me somewhere if he wanted. Mom, please. Mason intervened with a tense voice. You're misinterpreting everything. This is just to help you, to make your life easier. I just want to understand, son. I looked at him with those innocent mother eyes he knew so well. It's just that your father always taught me to be careful with these topics. Harper shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. Mr. Thompson watched us all with growing professional interest. The tension in the room was palpable. I continued reading every word, every clause, every bit of fine print. I took my time. I asked questions. I asked for clarifications. I saw Mason getting more and more desperate, Harper biting her lower lip until almost making it bleed, the notary starting to realize something didn't add up in this situation. Finally, after almost 30 minutes of meticulous review, I closed the folder and handed it back to Mason. "I'm not going to sign this today." The silence that followed was absolute. Mason froze with the folder in his hands, his face going through a spectrum of emotions: confusion, frustration, contained rage. "What? Why not?" His voice came out sharper than he intended. "Because I want my own lawyer to review it first. I told you yesterday, son, it's not mistrust, it's prudence." I kept my tone soft, reasonable, completely calm. "But Mom, Mr. Thompson is already here. I already paid for his time." Mason was losing his composure. "And I will pay him too, for the trouble of coming without a result." I took out my wallet and extracted several bills. "What is your fee, Mr. Thompson?" The notary looked at the bills, then at Mason, then at me. Something in his expression changed. "It's $100, ma'am. But the young man already paid in advance. Then take this as additional compensation for making you come out here for nothing." I handed him $150. The man took them, packed his things in the briefcase, and said goodbye with a professional courtesy that didn't include promises to return. When the door closed behind Mr. Thompson, the atmosphere in the living room changed radically. Mason dropped the folder on the coffee table harder than necessary. Harper crossed her arms. Both looked at me with a hostility they didn't even try to hide completely anymore. "I don't understand why you're being so difficult with this." Mason paced from one side to the other like a caged animal. "I am literally just trying to help you, and I appreciate it, son, but I need time to think it over properly." I got up from my chair with an exaggerated groan. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm exhausted. I'm going to lie down for a while." I went up to my room, leaving them downstairs with their frustration. I lay on the bed, but not to rest, but to think. The moment had arrived. I could no longer prolong this farce. Every day I spent in this house, pretending normality with these two people who planned to destroy me, sickened my soul a little more. From my room, I could hear their voices rising in argument. They weren't trying to lower the volume. They probably thought I was so tired I had fallen asleep immediately. "I told you we had to pressure her more." Harper's voice pierced the walls. "Now she's suspecting something." I saw how she looked at us. "She's not suspecting anything. She's just stubborn, like she's always been." Mason sounded frustrated, defeated. "But eventually she'll sign. She has no other choice." "And what if she never signs? What if that damn notary told her something that put her on alert?" Harper was panicking. "Then we go to Plan B. We declare her mentally incompetent." "I already explained it to you." But Mason's voice didn't sound as sure as before. I sat up in bed and took out my phone. I called Sarah, the real estate agent. "We already have offers for the house." "Miss Eleanor, I was just about to call you. We have 3 excellent offers. The highest is for $335,000. A young couple who is willing to close the deal in 2 weeks and accepts the property as is." Her voice sounded excited. "I accept. Prepare all the documents." My voice was firm, decided. "Perfect. Do you want us to coordinate a date for the couple to see the property?" "It's not necessary. They already saw it in the photos and the video you sent them, correct?" "Yes, but usually buyers want to see in person before. Tell them I have to sell fast for personal reasons. If they are willing to close without more visits, I'll drop $5,000. $330,000. Deal closed in 2 weeks. I was willing to lose a little money in exchange for speed." Sarah paused. "Let me contact them. I'll call you in an hour." 40 minutes later, my phone rang. They accepted. They want to close in 10 days, if possible. They have the cash ready. Perfect. Proceed with everything. I hung up and stared at the ceiling of my room. 10 days. In 10 days this house would no longer be mine, but it wouldn't be theirs either. It would never be theirs. I also called my lawyer, the same one who had handled Arthur's inheritance. "I need you to prepare a formal letter for my son, informing him that he has 30 days to vacate the property once the sale is finalized. Are you sure about this, Miss Eleanor? His voice had a tone of paternal concern. Completely sure. And I also need you to be present when I communicate it to him. I want everything legally documented. Understood. I'll prepare everything. The following days were an exercise in absolute control. Mason tried several more times to get me to sign the power of attorney, each time with different arguments. That the lawyer had found problems with the inheritance requiring immediate action. That there was an investment opportunity we couldn't pass up. That the bank was asking questions about Arthur's money. All lies. And I let them fall without effect. I already told you I'm going to review it with my lawyer. Son, have patience. And every time I said it, I saw his frustration grow a little more. Harper changed tactics. She became even sweeter, more attentive, cooking my favorite meals, offering to help me with everything. Mom, let me take you to the bank tomorrow. We can review your accounts together, organize everything. It would be fun. A girl's day. I rejected every offer with politeness, and I saw how behind her smile, resentment grew. I packed my things in secret, only the essentials. Clothes, important documents, some photographs of when Mason was a child and still loved me genuinely. I left everything else. The furniture, the ceramic ornaments they despised so much, the crocheted doilies. Let them do whatever they wanted with all that. I didn't need it anymore. Day 9 arrived. Tomorrow would be the closing of the house sale. This night would be my last night sleeping here. And I had decided that this night would also be the night I would tell them everything. I sat in front of the mirror in my room and looked at myself really for the first time in years. There was Eleanor, 68 years old, with wrinkles that told stories of suffering and sacrifice, gray hair that was once jet black, hands rough and marked by decades of hard work. But in my eyes, I saw something new. Fierceness, determination, power. I put on my dark green dress, the one I saved for special occasions. I combed my hair with care. I put on light makeup. I wanted to look dignified for this moment. I wanted them to remember this image of me not as the victim they planned to create, but as the strong woman I always was, but whom they never knew how to appreciate. I went downstairs at 7 in the evening. Mason and Harper were in the living room watching television, as always. When they saw me enter dressed up, they looked at me with surprise. "Are you going out, Mom?" asked Mason. "No. We are going to eat dinner, the three of us together, tonight. I have something important to tell you." My voice had a quality they hadn't heard before. Authority. Control. I prepared dinner myself that night. It wasn't anything elaborate, just pasta with tomato sauce and salad, but I did it with hands steadier than I'd had in weeks. I set the table carefully, using the cream-colored tablecloth I reserved for special occasions. The good plates I almost never took out. The wine glasses that were a wedding gift almost 40 years ago. Everything had to be perfect for this moment. Mason and Harper sat at the table with confused expressions. It wasn't normal for me to do all this on a random weekday. They looked at me with that mix of curiosity and suspicion, trying to decipher what was happening. "This looks very fancy, Mom." Mason tried to sound casual, but I detected the tension in his voice. "Is there a special occasion?" "Yes, there is." I served the pasta on each plate with deliberate, calm movements. "Today is a very important day. The day several things come to an end." Harper and Mason exchanged looks. "What do you mean?" she asked. I sat in my place at the head of the table, the position I had always occupied in this house. I folded my hands on my lap and looked them directly in the eyes, first one, then the other. The silence stretched for several seconds. I let the tension grow, let them feel uncomfortable. Exactly 11 days ago, I began with a clear and controlled voice. I arrived at this house after receiving the most wonderful news of my life. My brother Arthur had left me an inheritance, not the $80,000 I mentioned to you. I paused and saw how they leaned forward, attentive. But $850,000 in cash, plus an entire farm of 500 acres. The shock on their faces was instant. Their jaws literally dropped. Harper dropped the fork she had lifted. Mason froze mid-movement. "I came running home that day," I continued, without averting my gaze, excited like a little girl, imagining the joy on your faces when I told you, thinking about everything we could do together with that money. about how I could finally help you significantly after years of struggle. My voice remained even, without emotion, just stating facts. But when I got to the door of this house, I heard voices coming from the open window. Your voices. I saw the color drain from their faces. Mason opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. No, now it's my turn to speak. You already had enough time. The tone of my voice was steel. I heard you planning how to put me in a nursing home for $2,000 a month. I heard you discussing how to keep my Social Security check. I heard Harper call me an old cockroach, say that my mothball smell gave her nausea, that she was tired of pretending she cared. Harper turned pale as paper. Eleanor, I heard my son. My voice broke slightly here, but I composed myself. The son I carried in my womb, whom I nursed, for whom I sacrificed everything, say that it would be easier if I got sick soon, that I had already lived my life, that he wouldn't spend money on treatments for me because it wasn't worth it. Mom, that's not. Mason tried to interrupt, his face now red with shame and panic. Silence! My voice resonated in the dining room with an authority I had never used before. I heard every word of your plan to rob me of this house using a fraudulent power of attorney. I heard how you planned to sell it without me realizing and keep the money. I heard you call me stupid, stingy, a dead weight. Every word came out of my mouth like a bullet. And I decided in that moment that the naive Eleanor, the self-sacrificing mother who forgives everything, had died. In her place, someone new was born. Someone who was finally going to think of herself first. I got up from the chair and walked to the window, turning my back on them for a moment to regain composure. When I turned around, my eyes were dry but shining with determination. These last few days have been very productive for me. I began to walk slowly around the table, like a lawyer presenting evidence to the jury. I hired the best financial advisor in the city. I invested the $850,000 in a way that generates approximately $4,500 a month in passive income. I changed my will with a certified estate attorney. My son Mason is completely disinherited. My entire estate will go to a foundation that helps single mothers in vulnerable situations, women like I was once. Mason stood up abruptly. You can't do that. I'm your only son. I can and I did. It is already signed, sealed, and legally registered. My voice didn't tremble. I also hired a real estate agent. This house, the house you planned to steal from me, was sold 3 days ago. The closing of the sale is tomorrow at 10 in the morning, for $330,000. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see their brains processing the information, calculating, panicking. $330,000. Harper whispered, doing the mental math of everything they had just lost. That's right. And before you ask, no, you won't see a cent of that money either. I took an envelope out of my pocket and let it drop onto the table. This is a legal eviction notice. You have exactly 30 days starting tomorrow to remove all your belongings and find another place to live. But we have nowhere to go. We have no money, Mason shouted, and the desperation in his voice was real. How interesting. I crossed my arms, because I didn't have money either when I was widowed at 30 with a 4-year-old child. And somehow I survived. I worked 3 simultaneous jobs. I slept 4 hours a night for years. I literally broke my back, so you would have food, education, opportunities. My voice rose in volume, and I did it alone, without complaining, without planning to betray anyone, without thinking about sticking my son in a nursing home when he became inconvenient. Mom, please. Mason approached with hands outstretched, and for the first time in days I saw real tears in his eyes. I know I made a terrible mistake. I know what we said was unforgivable, but we didn't plan to do it really. We were just venting, frustrated. You know how it is when people are under financial stress. A mistake? I laughed, and the sound came out bitter, dry. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk at the supermarket. What you two did was meticulously plan how to defraud, rob, and abandon me. You brought a notary to this house to make me sign fraudulent documents. Harper took me shopping with the specific purpose of exhausting me so I would be too tired to think clearly. That is not a mistake, son. That is premeditated malice. Harper stood up too, with tears running down her cheeks. Please, Eleanor. I know I was horrible. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But don't do this to us. We are family, family. I repeated the word as if it were poison in my mouth. Family doesn't plan to lock their loved ones in cheap nursing homes to keep a $1,200 check. Family doesn't call the person who gave them a roof when they had nothing a cockroach. Family doesn't calculate how long you will take to die so they can keep your things. I approached Mason until I was inches from his face. I looked him directly in the eyes, those eyes that once looked with genuine love when he was a child. I gave you everything. Absolutely everything. My youth, my health, my dreams, my opportunities, my money, my time, my love. And you took it as if it were your right, as if I owed you all that simply for having been born. My voice broke slightly, but I continued. You never learned the value of sacrifice because you never had to sacrifice anything. I gave you everything so easily that you thought that was how the world worked, that people simply give you things without even expecting respect in return. I'm sorry. Mason was crying openly now. I'm so sorry, Mom. You're right about everything. I was a horrible son, a horrible human being, but give me a chance to fix it, please. There is nothing to fix. My voice was final, definitive. It's already done. Tomorrow I sign the sale papers. The day after tomorrow, I move to my brother's farm. I already hired workers to restore it. I already spoke with the neighbors in the nearby town. I am going to live the rest of my life in peace, surrounded by nature, with enough money to never worry again. I am going to have the life I deserved to have decades ago. I turned around and began to climb the stairs to my room. Their voices followed me, pleading, crying, but I didn't care anymore. I reached my room and locked the door. The next morning, I woke up at 6. I went down with my suitcase already packed. They were still asleep, exhausted from the night of crying and drama. I left the house keys on the dining table, along with the eviction notice and a final note that simply said, "Learn to value people before you lose them." I walked out of that house for the last time, feeling the weight of decades of sacrifice finally lifting from my shoulders. The morning sun greeted me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with fresh, clean air. I drove toward my new life with a smile on my lips, a smile of freedom, of justice, of rebirth. At 68 years old, for the first time in my existence, I was going to live for myself, and it felt glorious. I picked up my daughter-in-law's coat from the dry cleaners. The owner, a man I'd known for many years, suddenly pulled me aside and whispered, "Listen to me carefully. Take your grandchildren and get out of this town before sunrise." I froze and asked him, "Why?" He pulled out a small plastic bag, and with a trembling voice, he said, "Because I found this inside your daughter-in-law's coat. When I saw what was inside, I couldn't breathe." Without thinking, I held my grandchildren tight and, "I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has traveled." As evening fell, the day's heat still clung to my fingers while I carried the heavy basket from the market. Sweat soaked my blouse, and I walked slowly down the old street where the peeling paint on the walls told the story of this town's many years. Arthur's Dry Cleaning appeared on the corner. The faded wooden sign swayed in the wind. I stopped. I pulled the wrinkled yellow claim ticket from my purse. That morning, Chloe, my daughter-in-law, had pressed it into my hand, her voice soft but rushed. "Mom, please, pick up the wool coat from Arthur's. I have meetings all day. End." I nodded without much thought. To me, it was just one more errand, like so many I always did for my children. When I walked in, the smell of fabric softener mixed with the steam rising from a corner. Arthur, an old man with glasses perched on the end of his nose, was behind the counter, flipping through a notebook with his bony hands. I handed him the ticket. He glanced at it and nodded, wordlessly disappearing into the back storeroom. He usually sent the young man who worked for him, but today he went himself, moving slowly, as if he were trying to buy time. I waited without a worry, stroking the handle of my basket, thinking only about what I would cook for my grandchildren that night. He returned with Chloe's coat, carefully wrapped in clear plastic that smelled of softener. But instead of handing it to me, he stopped. He scanned the shop, making sure no one else was there. I thought it was strange, and before I could ask, his rough, calloused hand gripped my arm tightly. "Eleanor," he murmured in a hoarse voice, almost a whisper. "Come here for a moment." Without giving me time to react, he led me behind a worn-out curtain that covered the back of the shop. The smell of bleach and steam made it hard to breathe. Piles of clothes waiting to be ironed were stacked like a messy wall, hiding something. "You need to see this," he said, his voice trembling as he opened a rickety drawer under the counter. From it, he pulled out a small, clear plastic bag just big enough to make my heart stop. Inside was a bank transfer receipt, stamped in red, with a figure so large I had to look at it several times to be sure I wasn't mistaken. Millions of dollars. Who would keep something like that in a coat pocket? And next to the paper, a photograph. The innocent faces of Sophia and Leo, my grandchildren, with circles drawn over them in a red marker. They were crooked, angry circles, as if drawn in a fit of rage, or worse, with a dark intention. I felt the blood in my veins turn to ice, my hands as cold as stone. "Arthur, what is this?" I stammered, my voice breaking. He shook his head, his eyes filled with fear, as if even he couldn't bear what he had found. "Eleanor, you have to get the children out of here immediately. Don't waste a second. You must be gone before sunrise." His voice was harsh, almost pleading. I wanted to ask him more. I wanted an explanation, but he just placed the bag in my hand, repeating, "I can't keep this here. It's too terrifying." I took the coat, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I tucked the bag deep into my pocket, feeling like I was carrying a bomb about to explode. As I left, my steps were uncertain, as if I were walking on air, unable to feel the ground beneath my feet. The basket tipped, and a few tomatoes rolled out, nearly falling onto the sidewalk. Outside, the world continued with its usual noise, the squeal of a bus's brakes, the calls of street vendors, the laughter of children running down the street. But in my head, only Arthur's insistent voice echoed, repeating like a funeral bell. Before sunrise, the sky darkened, the shadow of dusk swallowed by the thick night. I entered the house, my feet as heavy as stones, the zip-top bag holding the terrifying secret still deep in my pocket, burning like a curse. The large house, once filled with the laughter of Sophia and Leo, was now frozen in an icy silence. Ben, my son, was on a business trip in Denver, hundreds of miles away. It was just me, my two small grandchildren, and the terrifying emptiness Chloe had left behind. My phone vibrated, a short message from my daughter-in-law. "Mom, I have an unexpected meeting. I'll be very late. Please take care of the kids." I stared at the words on the screen, and a nameless anxiety rose in my chest. Was it true, or just an excuse to hide something? I walked into the living room, where Sophia and Leo were focused on playing with blocks on the old rug. Sophia, a 7-year-old girl with big, round eyes, was carefully building a little house out of colorful pieces. "Grandma, look, my house has a chimney," she shouted excitedly, her voice as clear as bells. Leo, the little one, only 4 years old, was beside her, hugging a plastic dinosaur, murmuring a song without words. Seeing them, my heart clenched. Just a few hours earlier, I thought they were safe in the arms of their family, but now, the image of the 2 red circles on the photo haunted me, like an invisible threat lurking somewhere. I forced a smile, stroking Sophia's head. "It's beautiful, my love. Rest for a bit, Grandma will make dinner." But in my mind, everything was spinning. Arthur's voice wouldn't stop. "You have to leave before sunrise." I didn't know what I was running from, but my instincts as a mother and a grandmother told me those 2 children couldn't stay here a minute longer. I walked silently to my bedroom, locked the door, and with a trembling hand, I dialed the number of Grace, a nurse friend I trusted completely. Grace and I had been through so much together, from the lean years raising our children to the endless nights caring for my husband in the hospital. If there was anyone I could trust now, it was her. "Hello, Grace. It's me, Eleanor," I whispered, my voice cracked with worry. "I need your help. Do you know a reliable taxi, one that can make a long trip, tonight?" Grace was silent for a moment, perhaps sensing the strangeness in my voice. "Eleanor, what's wrong? Why the rush?" I took a deep breath, holding back tears. "I can't explain right now. I just need a cab, as soon as possible." Grace didn't press, only answering briefly. "I'll call my brother. He's a driver. very discreet. Give me 10 minutes. I nodded, even though I knew she couldn't see me, and hung up with my heart in a knot. I went to the kitchen, my hands moving quickly. I took some bread from the cabinet, sliced some cheese, and packed some cookies the children loved. I put a couple of water bottles in a small bag, wondering what else I should bring. I didn't know where I was going, only that my grandchildren couldn't go hungry or be left helpless. From the kitchen, I looked toward the living room. Sophia was showing Leo how to build a bridge. Their laughter was like knives in my chest. They were so innocent, so carefree, with no idea of the storm that was about to break over our family. I wondered if I was wrong, if it was all a misunderstanding, and I was overreacting. But then the image of the photo with the 2 red circles reappeared in my mind, and I knew I had no other choice. I ran to the children's room. I opened the closet and grabbed a few items of clothing. The blue sweater Sophia likes, Leo's superhero pajamas, several pairs of socks. I also packed the yarn doll Sophia always hugs when she sleeps, and the toy car Leo never lets go of. I threw everything into a large suitcase, messy, but I didn't have time to organize anything. The streetlight flickered through the window, making my heart pound. I drew the curtains, afraid a curious neighbor might notice my strange haste. This town is small. Everyone knows everyone, and I didn't want anyone asking questions. The phone vibrated again. A text from Grace. The taxi is here, it's on the corner. My brother's name is Mike, you can trust him. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I went out to the living room, knelt beside Sophia, and gently shook her shoulder. Let's go, my love, I whispered in the sweetest voice I could manage. Put on your coat, we're going for a night ride. Sophia looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. A night ride? Where to, Grandma? I smiled, though inside I was a wreck. To a very fun place. But we have to leave now, or it will be too late. Leo rubbed his eyes, starting to complain about being woken up. I'm sleepy, Grandma, he mumbled drowsily. I pulled a piece of candy from my pocket and put it in his hand. Here, be a good boy. Come with me, you can sleep later. Leo grinned from ear to ear and immediately forgot about being tired. I picked him up, took Sophia by the hand, and hurried toward the taxi waiting on the corner. The hallway to the door seemed endless, my sandals dragging against the cold floor, rushed and trembling. I put the children in the back seat and carefully buckled their seatbelts. Sophia hugged her doll, looking at me with curiosity, but still trusting. Leo let out a long yawn, resting his head on his sister's shoulder. I sat next to them, clutching the suitcase to my chest, my heart heavy. The driver, a middle-aged man with a tired face, watched me in the rearview mirror. Where are you headed at this hour, ma'am? He asked, his tone concerned. I swallowed hard, my voice breaking. To the bus station, please, as fast as you can. The car started, breaking the stillness of the night. Through the window, I watched the house recede, sinking into the darkness like a tomb holding secrets and betrayals. The bus station at midnight was as bustling as a market that never sleeps. The neon signs, green and red, flickered over old posters, making my head spin. The calls of street vendors, the horns of buses, and the screech of suitcases rolling on the concrete mixed into a chaotic concert. And yet, that disorder made me feel safer, as if my grandchildren and I could get lost in the crowd and escape the invisible gaze that was watching us. I held Sophia's hand tightly. Leo was sleeping soundly on my shoulder. His warm breath on my neck reminded me that I had to stay strong, even if I felt broken inside. I approached the ticket counter, trying to sound calm as I asked. 3 tickets to Charleston, the last trip of the day. The ticket agent, a man with a messy mustache, glanced at me and the children. Then he slid 3 tickets through the window. It's leaving immediately. Get on quick, or you'll miss it, he said in a monotone voice. I nodded, paid, and turned to Sophia, forcing a smile. We're going to visit a distant relative. We're going to have a great time. The girl nodded, though her big eyes reflected curiosity. Which relative, Grandma? Do I know them? I stroked her head, avoiding her gaze. It's an old family member. You haven't met them yet. Get some sleep. It's a long ride. Sophia nodded again, hugging her yarn doll tightly, her eyes fixed on the bus window. The bus pulled away, the roar of the engine breaking the night's silence. Leo remained asleep on my shoulder, his head lolling, his hand still clutching his toy car. I looked outside, the streetlights blurring past like fading memories. Charleston, the place where I had lived more than 20 years ago, was the only option in my head at that moment. It was there that my husband and I built the first years of our marriage, where Ben was born, and where I once felt safe. Now, I just hoped that city would be a refuge for the three of us, even if only temporarily. But deep down, I knew I wasn't just running away. I was searching for a way to face a truth I didn't yet dare to name. When we arrived in Charleston, it was already dawn, the pale light filtering through the old rooftops. I carried Leo and led Sophia to a small motel hidden behind the central square. The room was cramped, with a faint smell of dampness, and a double bed covered in faded sheets. I put both children on the bed and tucked them in. Sophia murmured in her sleep, "Grandma, where's Mommy?" That question pierced my heart like a dagger. I just stroked her head and whispered, "Sleep, sweetie. Your mommy is busy. She'll be here in a little while." But I knew very well it was a lie. Chloe, the daughter-in-law I once loved so much, was now an enigma, a dark shadow I didn't dare to face. I sat by the window, my hands clasped, my mind racing. The plastic bag was still in my coat pocket, as heavy as a curse. The transfer receipt, the photo with 2 red circles, and Arthur's warning were pieces of a puzzle I didn't know how to begin to solve. I thought of Ben, my son, who was so far away. I wanted to call him, to tell him everything, but every time I picked up the phone, I stopped. If I was wrong, if it was all a misunderstanding, I would destroy his family. But if I was right, if Chloe was really involved in something terrible, how could I tell my son that the woman he loves, the mother of his children, could be betraying all of us? In the midst of my confusion, an idea sparked. I had to go to the church. Father Michael, the elderly priest in Charleston, was the only one I could trust right now. He had been with me when my husband died. He held my hand through the darkest days. If anyone could help me find my way, it was him. I decided that morning I would take the children to Mass, to pray for peace and to find a way out. The next day, I woke Sophia and Leo. I helped them get dressed. "Come to church with me, and I'll buy you ice cream afterward," I said, faking cheerfulness in my voice. Leo got excited. "Chocolate, Grandma?" I smiled and nodded, though inside I was filled with worry. We walked to St. Francis Church, where the ancient stone walls and the ringing of the bells gave a rare sense of calm. Sophia held my hand, while Leo ran ahead with his toy car dangling from his fingers. Looking at them, all I prayed for was to preserve that innocence forever. Father Michael recognized me as soon as I entered the church. His white hair shone under the light streaming through the stained glass windows, and his kind but piercing eyes looked straight at me. "Eleanor, it's been too long," he said in a warm voice. "What are you and your grandchildren doing here? Is something wrong?" I just nodded, unable to speak in front of the children. After Mass, I let Sophia and Leo play in the church's backyard, where other children were running around. I asked Father Michael for a private conversation. In a small, quiet room behind the altar, the smell of old wood and melted wax helped me breathe easier. Gathering my courage, I told him everything. Chloe's coat, the transfer receipt with a huge sum, and the photo of Sophia and Leo with 2 terrifying red circles. I handed him the plastic bag, my hands shaking. Father Michael was silent for a long time, his hands clasped together, his face growing harder by the second. Finally, he sighed and said in a grave voice, "Eleanor, this is beyond what a priest can handle. This isn't just a family matter. This is a much greater danger. You need someone who understands the law." He paused, looking at me with deep concern. "I know someone who can help. Victoria, a very good lawyer and a parishioner here. She'll know what to do." I nodded, feeling a ray of hope light up in the darkness. That same afternoon, in the small confessional, I met Victoria for the first time. She was young, maybe a little over 30, with short hair and eyes so sharp they seemed to see everything. Wearing latex gloves, she carefully opened the bag and examined the receipt under the dim yellow light. "This transaction code belongs to a ghost company registered through an offshore account," she said, as her fingers typed quickly on her laptop, her face serious with concentration. "A non-existent company. She paused and pointed to the last line of the document. Signed by Julian Cortez. That name meant nothing to me, but when Victoria looked at Father Michael, they exchanged a meaningful glance. That man has been involved in financial fraud and money laundering, Victoria said in a low voice. This is not simple, Eleanor. I felt my hands, resting on the wooden table, begin to tremble. But why my grandchildren? I asked, my voice breaking. Why are their faces marked in red? Victoria didn't answer right away. She just looked at me with compassion. We need to investigate more, she said finally. But the first thing is for you and the children to stay here, where you'll be safe. I will contact some trusted colleagues to look into this. Father Michael placed his hand on my shoulder, his voice soft but firm. Eleanor, God will protect you and your grandchildren, but you must be strong for them. I hugged Sophia and Leo as we left the church. As the gray afternoon covered the cobblestone streets, the bells rang behind us, reminding me that I was no longer alone. The next day, I found myself in front of a motel door in Charleston, my heart on fire. Sophia and Leo were playing in the yard of Grace, my old nurse friend whom I trusted completely. Through the wooden fence, I watched them. Sophia was teaching Leo how to blow soap bubbles, and their crystal-clear laughter filled the sunny morning. I smiled, but that smile felt heavy, as if every second spent there was stolen from them. Grace, can you watch the kids for a day? I asked, trying to stay calm. I have to go back to my town to sort out some important personal matters. Grace looked at me. Her sharp eyes seemed to want to ask more, but she just nodded. Don't worry, Eleanor. The children will be fine with me. I'll make them pudding and tell them stories. I squeezed her hand, saying nothing more, but with infinite gratitude in my heart. I took the first bus of the morning back to town, huddled in a seat at the back, the plastic bag still in my coat pocket, a constant reminder of the terrifying secret I was carrying. The landscape passed by the window-dry cornfields, dilapidated houses, but I saw nothing but the image of the two red circles on the photo of Sophia and Leo. I wondered what I was doing, if it was right to leave the children behind and return to this dangerous place. But I knew that if I wanted to protect them, I had to uncover the truth, no matter how cruel. The family house appeared as the bus pulled into the last stop. It was silent, cold. It was no longer the home Ben and I had built over so many years. Now it felt like a crime scene waiting for me to discover it. I took the spare key from the bottom of my purse, my hand trembling as I opened the gate. The squeak of the hinges echoed in the silence, making me turn my head with a start. The street was deserted, only a few dogs barking in the distance. I went inside and locked the door, feeling like I was crossing into another world, where everything I had believed could crumble. The living room was just as I had left it the day before. Chloe's light blanket was thrown carelessly over the sofa, as if she had been there just hours ago. On the side, a half-drunk cup of coffee, the dried foam now a brown stain. I stood there, looking around, trying to find some sign, some clue to explain what was happening. But the air inside the house was heavy, as if even the walls were keeping secrets. I didn't hesitate any longer, and went straight to Ben and Chloe's room, where I knew there was something I needed to check. Under the closet, the small gray safe was still there, motionless like a silent accomplice. I remembered Ben's birthday a few months ago, when Chloe, drunk after several shots of tequila, had blurted out the combination while laughing with me. Mom, you wouldn't believe it, Ben always tells me to change the code, but I like May 12th, 2018, our wedding day. At the time, I just laughed, thinking it was an unimportant detail. But now, that sequence was the key to opening the door to the truth. I knelt, dragging the dust-covered safe out. My hands shook as I turned each number. 120518. The dry click echoed like a gunshot in the silence, making my heart leap. I opened the heavy door of the safe, breathing heavily. Inside, stacks of dollar bills were neatly piled. The green glow left me stunned. Tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, a sum my family had never dreamed of. Next to them, a pile of fake passports and IDs, with unfamiliar names. Maria Gonzalez, Juan Alvarez, Sofia Morales. I flipped through them one by one, my heart pounding as if I were reading a list of ghosts. In a corner were 2 sealed cell phones, ready to be activated on some plan. But what took my breath away were the papers at the bottom. 3 business-class plane tickets from Chicago to Madrid in the names of Chloe, Sophia, and Leo. Ben's name was not there. I checked them over and over, hoping I was mistaken, but the cold truth was like a knife piercing my chest. Chloe was planning to escape, to take my grandchildren, and leave my son behind like an obstacle. I pulled out one more envelope, my hands trembling. Inside there was a photo. Chloe, smiling radiantly, next to an unknown man, elegant in a black suit. On the back of the photo, a handwritten scrawl, "My Cortez." That name, Julian Cortez, matched the signature on the transfer receipt. The whole room began to spin, the air grew thick, and I struggled to breathe. I sat on the floor, my back against the dresser, the photo falling from my hands. Chloe, the daughter-in-law I had loved like a daughter, the one who cooked with me for family meals, the one who hugged me crying when Ben had trouble at work. That woman was betraying us. Not only was she betraying Ben, but she was also planning to take my 2 grandchildren, as if they were part of a deal. I thought of Sophia, with her innocent smile as she drew pictures for me, and of Leo, with his habit of hugging my legs whenever I baked. How could she be so cruel? How could she circle their little faces with a red marker, as if they were merchandise? At that moment, the familiar sound of my neighbor, Mr. Henderson's truck, rumbled down the street. I jumped. Hurriedly, I put everything back in the safe, trying to leave it as it was. My hands were shaking so much that I dropped a passport, but I managed to pick it up. I pushed the safe back into place and closed it. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like a guilty person's. I stood up, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and tried to calm down. As I headed for the door, I spotted a torn envelope in the kitchen trash can, with the logo of a foreign bank shining in the light. Instinctively, I took it. I put it in my jacket pocket without a second thought. When the door slammed shut behind me, I walked out onto the street as if floating. I knew I wasn't just running away. In my pocket, I carried the proof of a terrible plan. Chloe planned to escape with Cortez, taking a fortune, abandoning Ben, and worst of all, taking my 2 grandchildren with them as part of the deal. I returned to the motel in Charleston, my legs heavy as lead and my pocket still holding the horrible evidence from the house. It was now midday. The dim sunlight filtered through the slits of the thin curtains, falling on the old wooden floor. Sophia and Leo had just woken up from their nap. They were on the bed, rubbing their eyes. Sophia, her hair tangled, looked up at me, her big, innocent eyes wide. "Grandma, when are we going home to Mommy?" Her question was like a knife in my chest. I knelt, stroked her hair, and tried to smile, though I knew the smile was forced. "Soon, my love. Your mom is busy with something. Stay with me for a few more days, okay?" But my throat was closing up. I couldn't say more. Leo, hugging his plastic dinosaur, interrupted. "Grandma, I want cookies." I nodded. I took a package from my bag and gave it to him, just to hide the fact that my hands were still trembling. I took both of them to the motel's small courtyard, where there was an old swing set. "Play for a while. I'll watch you from here," I told them, trying to sound calm. But inside, I felt like I was on the edge of a cliff. What I had found in the safe, the stacks of money, fake passports, plane tickets, and the photo of Chloe with Cortez would not stop tormenting me. I knew I couldn't stay here forever, nor could I keep running without facing the truth. But how could I protect my grandchildren if their own mother, whom I once trusted, was part of this nightmare? Later that afternoon, Victoria arrived. Her steps were quick, but her eyes reflected concern. She was accompanied by 2 men in plain clothes, though their bearing made their cold professionalism clear. They introduced themselves as federal agents, showing credentials with official seals. "Ma'am, I'm Agent Miller," one of them said in a grave, firm voice. "This is my partner, Agent Davis. We need to see everything you've found." I nodded and led them to the cramped rental room, where a small wooden table had become the center of the entire truth. I spread everything out on the table. The receipt for a massive transfer, the envelope from the bank, a photo of Chloe, smiling next to Cortez, 3 plane tickets to Madrid, and a stack of fake passports. Each object was like a new stab, reminding me of Chloe's betrayal. Agent Davis took a still-sealed cell phone and connected it, via a USB cable, to a small device. His laptop screen lit up, showing lines of code running at high speed. "We can recover the deleted data," he said without looking up. "These things usually hold more information than people think." I remained seated, my hands clasped, my heart pounding hard. Outside, Sophia and Leo were playing in the courtyard, their laughter reaching me, but I didn't dare to look. I felt that if I lost control for even a second, I would let out the pain that was suffocating me. After a few tense minutes, Davis turned the screen towards me. There was a photo folder, and the first image was again of Sophia and Leo. Their innocent faces were circled in red marker, distorted with a cruel intention. I held my breath, as if the air in the room had vanished. Agent Miller pointed at the screen. His voice lowered, as if trying to prevent me from breaking down. "Ma'am, this isn't a personal mark. It's a symbol used in human trafficking networks." The word trafficking sounded like a thunderclap, leaving me paralyzed. He enlarged the image and showed a series of tiny numbers in the corner. "It's a transaction code. The red circle means target selected. The children are part of a much larger plan." Instinctively, I wanted to hug my grandchildren, even though they were outside, as if I could protect them from that terrifying truth. My eyes filled with tears, but I refused to cry. I didn't want the little ones to see me. "You mean they plan to sell my grandchildren?" I asked in a trembling voice, barely audible. Miller nodded with a look full of compassion. "We don't know the whole plan yet, but this evidence points to an organized criminal network." "And the woman in this photo?" he asked, pointing to Chloe. "Most likely an accomplice." Victoria placed her hand on my shoulder, and her voice trembled too. "Eleanor, this is no longer a family matter. It's an extremely serious criminal case. We're going to do everything we can to protect the children." But her words couldn't calm the storm inside me. Chloe, the daughter-in-law I had loved like a daughter, who was with me when Leo was born, who shared laughter on so many family nights. How could she be so cruel? How could she turn two children, her own blood, into targets for a dirty business? Davis continued typing on the laptop, pulling up messages that had been deleted. One appeared, short but cold. "2 targets selected. Ensure timely delivery." The message was sent from Chloe's number to an unknown number, signed J.C. Julian Cortez. I felt the blood in my body freeze. She really did this," I murmured, not knowing who I was talking to. Victoria took my hand, squeezing it gently. "Eleanor, I know this hurts so much, but you have to be strong for the children." They told me to stay calm, to act as if nothing was wrong. "Do not communicate with Chloe," Miller said in a firm voice. "She must not know what you've discovered. We need time to investigate further." I nodded, but my heart was in a tangled mess. How could I pretend to be normal when every breath carried the pain of betrayal? How could I look into Sophia's and Leo's eyes, knowing their mother had planned to sell them as if they were merchandise? I brought the 2 grandchildren back to the room, trying to play with them as usual. "Grandma, tell the story about the vampire," insisted Leo, climbing onto my lap. I hugged the boy and told him the story he loves, but my voice broke, as if I myself were lost in a nightmare. Sophia was on the side, drawing with colored pencils, humming a song. I looked at them, and my chest ached as if it were being torn apart. They were carefree, innocent, not knowing their world had been on the verge of being shattered by the very mother they loved. Outside, black clouds gathered, and a sudden downpour began. The rain beat hard on the motel's tin roof, marking the rhythm of the chaos in my chest. I drew the curtains, hugged the children, trying to protect them from the storm outside and the storm within me. The next morning, a black car pulled up in front of the motel, with no license plate, no lights, but I knew it was a federal police vehicle. Victoria had called earlier to tell me to get ready. "Eleanor, today we're going to plan everything," she said over the phone, her voice confident, though with a hint of concern. I quickly put on a sweater. I woke the 2 grandchildren and asked them to stay with Grace for one more day. "Where are you going, Grandma?" Sophia asked, with those big, curious eyes. I stroked her head, trying to force a smile. "I'm going to see an old friend. I'll be back for you in the afternoon." Mateo, nibbling on a cookie, nodded without asking further. I kissed them on the forehead and got into the car, my heart as heavy as if I were carrying the whole world on my shoulders. The federal police office in Charleston was hidden on a narrow street with no sign to indicate that serious cases were handled there. I went in and was taken to a small meeting room where the smell of old coffee and papers hung in the air. Victoria was already waiting, seated at a long table. Across from her were 3 officers, Miller, Davis, and a female officer named Hayes, whose gaze was both stern and gentle. "Eleanor, we've reviewed the evidence you gave us," Miller began in a grave but sharp voice. "This is a major case, related to an international crime ring. We need your cooperation to capture Chloe and Cortez." They explained the plan. To create a fake scene where Sophia and Leo had disappeared, to make Chloe and Cortez panic and reveal their movements. "We will monitor all their communications," Hayes said, pointing to a screen showing a map of the city. "We've installed a listening device on Chloe's phone and are tracking Cortez's number. They will contact each other, and then we will have enough evidence." I listened, but my heart tightened. "And my grandchildren, will they be safe?" I asked, my voice trembling, unable to hide my fear. Hayes put a hand on my shoulder with a firm look. "Don't worry. We have arranged an absolutely safe shelter for the children. You will be able to video call them whenever you want to see them." And they took me to another room where a social worker was playing with Sophia and Leo in a room full of toys. Sophia was coloring a picture, and Leo was building with Legos while babbling a story about a spaceship. Seeing them, I felt like crying. They didn't know I was trying to protect them from their own mother. "Eleanor, the children will stay here with me," the social worker said in a soft voice. "I will take care of them as if they were my own." I nodded, hugged my 2 grandchildren tightly one more time before leaving, feeling like I was leaving a part of my heart behind. That night, I returned to the motel and sat alone in the small room, phone in hand, waiting. Victoria and Davis were with me. The listening device was on the table, and the laptop screen glowed with the messages being monitored. Just as we expected, my phone vibrated. A message from Chloe, in a desperate tone. "Mom, where are you? Have you seen the kids? They're gone. I've called the police. I'm scared to death." I read the message and felt my heart clench. How could she fake it like that? How could she write those words when she herself had planned to take my grandchildren away? Davis motioned for me not to answer, just gently shaking his head. "Let her get tangled up on her own," he murmured. Half an hour later, Chloe's phone called an unknown number. The listening device activated, and her voice came through the speaker, nervous and trembling. "Cortez, the children are gone. I had everything ready, but I can't find them anywhere." The man's voice on the other end was hoarse and annoyed. "Calm down. We can't back out now. The plane tickets are already bought. The buyer on the other end is waiting. If we don't have the merchandise, we'll be in big trouble." The word merchandise was like a knife twisting in my skin. I clenched my fist, my nails digging into my palm, trying to hold back tears. Sophia and Leo, my 2 little angels, being called merchandise. I wanted to scream. I wanted to go confront Chloe. But Davis motioned for me to be quiet, his gaze cold. The call ended, but Chloe continued sending messages to Cortez. "If we don't find the children, the whole plan will fall apart. You have to do something." Davis gave a cold smile. "Let it fall apart. That's how it should be," he said in a grave voice. "This confession will be irrefutable evidence at trial." Victoria took my hand and squeezed it gently, as if trying to give me strength. "Eleanor, we're almost done with this," she said, but her voice also broke, as if she herself felt my pain. I stayed there, my cold hands clasped, feeling both a deep fear and a strange relief. Relief because I knew Chloe and Cortez were digging their own graves, but the pain still crushed my chest. I thought of the past days, when Chloe was a shy young woman newly arrived in the family, when she would sit with me in the kitchen, kneading bread and telling me her dream of opening a small shop. I loved her. I thought she was part of the family, but now every memory was like a wound that opened wider each time I recalled it. Outside the window, the night was thick, without a single star. I heard the soft murmur of several unlit car engines parked silently on the street corner. They were like beasts in waiting, patiently biding their time. I looked at Victoria, then at Davis, and felt like I was entering a chess game whose end I did not know. "Eleanor, you did the right thing," Victoria said, her voice low but firm. "You saved your grandchildren." I nodded, but inside, a doubt began to grow. Had I really saved them? Or was I just dragging them into a new nightmare? That night, darkness covered Charleston like a thick veil. I was sitting inside a federal police command vehicle, parked 2 blocks from a cheap hotel on the outskirts of town. The air inside the car was heavy, the smell of engine oil and cold coffee mixing and making it even harder for me to breathe. Victoria was beside me, her gaze as hard as steel, but her hands were clasped tightly, as if trying to contain her tension. Officer Hayes, who had reassured me that morning, was adjusting the radio, her voice deep but clear. "Eleanor, you just stay here and listen. We'll handle everything." But how could I be calm when my heart was beating so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest? Sophia and Leo were safe in the police station's playroom, but the mere thought that I was about to witness Chloe's betrayal made me tremble. Over the radio, short, sharp commands were heard, like knives. "Alpha Team, position on the northeast corner. Bravo Team, control the rear exit. The target is heading to the meeting point." I clenched my hands tightly, my nails digging into my palms, trying not to show my fear. Victoria placed a hand on my shoulder and murmured, "Eleanor, it will all be over tonight. You did the right thing by getting the children out." I nodded, but tears were already streaming silently down my cheeks. The right thing? What had I done besides run away and ask for help? Yet, deep in my heart, I knew I had no other choice. I had to protect my grandchildren, even if the price was facing the heart-wrenching truth about my daughter-in-law, whom I had once loved like a daughter. Hayes turned on the live feed from the listening device, and Chloe's voice echoed, shaky and fast. "Cortez, I don't understand. Where are those 2? Without them, what are we going to deliver in the deal?" Every word cut me like a knife. Deal. That word made me want to scream, to lunge out and slap her. How could she refer to Sophia and Leo, her own children, as if they were merchandise? Cortez's hoarse, rough voice replied, "Shut up. First, let's go to the hotel. The intermediary is already waiting there. If we don't bring the merchandise, we're finished." I held my breath, as if the air inside the car had vanished. Intermediary. Merchandise. Those words were needles in my chest, reminding me that this wasn't just a family betrayal, but a monstrous crime. Hayes whispered into the radio, "The target has entered the parking lot. Prepare to move in." Through the microphone, I heard the dull thud of a car door closing, then rapid footsteps on the concrete. I imagined Chloe and Cortez, 2 tense figures moving towards the empty parking lot, unaware they were walking straight into the trap set by the police. Suddenly, a firm shout tore through the quiet. "Federal police, hands up." The thunder of running boots, the click of flashlights turning on, and then a sharp scream from Chloe, so piercing it ripped through the night. "No, it can't be," she cried, her voice filled with terror. Over the radio, I heard sounds of a struggle. "Cortez, run!" Chloe yelled, but immediately an officer ordered, "Freeze, put your hands up, or I'll shoot." There was a thud, then the sound of Cortez's body hitting the ground next to a white van. "Don't move," another voice commanded. I heard the metallic click of handcuffs being fastened. Chloe was crying, her voice in pieces. "You're mistaken. I didn't do anything." But then I heard her purse fall to the ground, stacks of money spilling out, and the cold voice of an officer. "Do you have anything else to say?" Sitting in the car, I couldn't hold back anymore. Tears streamed silently down my cheeks. I didn't know if I was crying with relief because the trap had worked, or with the pain of facing the truth that Chloe, whom I had considered a daughter, was willing to sell my 2 grandchildren. Victoria took my hand, squeezing it tight. "Eleanor, they've got them. The children are safe," she said, her voice trembling. But the pain inside me did not subside. I thought of those nights when Chloe would sit with me, laughing, sharing small dreams. I believed her. I loved her. I thought she was part of the family. Now, all that was left was a ghost, someone who had wanted to destroy everything. A voice came over the radio, brief but authoritative. "Both targets secured. Operation successful, no casualties." Outside, the sirens all went on at once. The red and blue lights spun, reflecting off the old hotel walls. I heard patrol car engines starting, voices giving orders, hurried footsteps. The night seemed torn apart by chaos, but for me, it was the sign that the net of fate had finally closed. A few weeks later, I sat in the courtroom of the federal courthouse in Charleston. The air was heavy, thick, as if the walls held secrets. The benches were filled with neighbors, mixed with a few reporters armed with cameras and notebooks, their gazes sharp, ready to record every moment. I held Sophia and Leo tightly, the children snuggled against me, as if they could feel the tension in the air. Victoria was beside me, rubbing my back, whispering, "Eleanor, it will all be over today. You have been very brave." But how could I feel strong when my heart was in pieces? The truth about Chloe, about her terrible plan, was about to come to light, and I knew it would leave scars impossible to erase on me and my grandchildren. Chloe appeared in the defendant's box, wearing a beige prison jumpsuit, her hair tangled, with no trace of the radiant daughter-in-law I had known. Her face was gaunt, aged 10 years, her eyes sunken, as if her guilt also haunted her. Beside her, Cortez trembled, his hands cuffed, his head down, unable to look at anyone. Seeing him, I didn't know what to feel: rage, pain, or just a cold emptiness in my chest. I had loved Chloe. I had believed she was part of the family. I even defended her in her fights with Ben, but now she was just a stranger, a woman who had tried to sell my grandchildren as if they were merchandise. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man with a firm voice, stood up and began to speak. "Your Honor, we are trying a particularly serious case related to money laundering, conspiracy to kidnap children, and participation in a transnational criminal organization." He presented the evidence one by one, each piece like another stab in my heart. The transfer receipt with a huge sum appeared on the large screen. The numbers in red made the whole room murmur. Then he showed a pile of fake passports, strange names that recalled the criminal network Chloe and Cortez were involved in. 3 plane tickets to Madrid, only in the names of Chloe, Sophia, and Leo, were projected, making me squeeze my grandchildren's hands tightly so they wouldn't notice my trembling. But what made the room erupt was when the photo of Sophia and Leo appeared, with 2 crooked red circles marking their faces. Some women in the back rows exclaimed, "How horrible!" The murmur grew like a wave, filled with indignation and horror. I immediately pulled Sophia and Leo close, covering their eyes. "Grandma, what is that?" Sophia whispered in an innocent voice. I stroked her head and replied with a broken voice, "Nothing, sweetie. It's just an old photo." But inside, I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry until I was empty. How could I explain to them that their own mother had marked them as targets for a criminal enterprise? The prosecutor continued, his voice growing sharper, as he presented the recording of the phone call that changed everything. Chloe's voice filled the room, desperate but icy. "Cortez, the children are gone. Without them, what are we going to negotiate with?" Cortez's voice responded curtly. "First, go to the hotel. The intermediary is waiting." The entire room fell silent. Only Chloe's ragged breathing could be heard over the speaker. I heard every word as if it were being branded into my mind. Every phrase of hers was a knife, shattering the memories of the days when I believed she was family. Chloe's defense attorney stood up, trying to save her. "Your Honor, my client is a victim, manipulated by Julian Cortez. She was unaware of the trafficking network and had no intention of harming her children." But the prosecutor immediately retorted, his voice as sharp as a razor. "In the recording, the defendant herself says she needed the children to negotiate. That is the act of an accomplice, not a victim." He pointed to the screen, where the tape replayed, and Chloe's words echoed like an undeniable confession. Cortez remained silent, head bowed, like someone accepting his fate. When the judge's gavel struck, the entire room froze for a moment. The defendants, Chloe Lopez and Julian Cortez, are sentenced to lengthy prison terms for money laundering, conspiracy to kidnap children, and participation in a transnational criminal organization, the judge declared, his voice deep and firm. The room erupted in comments. Some shook their heads in disgust, others whispered in horror. I sat there, squeezing Victoria's hand, breathing a sigh of relief, but with a bitter knot in my throat. Justice had been served, but it couldn't erase the pain in my heart. Sophia tugged at my blouse, her voice very quiet. "Grandma, where's Mommy?" The girl's question pierced me like a knife. I hugged her tightly, unable to answer. How could I tell her that her mother, whom she loved, was being led away in handcuffs behind bars? Leo, sitting beside her, looked up with wide eyes. "Did Mommy go on a work trip, Grandma?" I just nodded, silent tears falling. "Yes, she's very busy, but Grandma and your dad will always be here with you, okay?" They both nodded, but I knew this truth would remain as an eternal scar on their hearts. When we left the courthouse, the scorching midday sun beat down on the square. People were dispersing, their laughter and conversations mixing with the noise of traffic, but for me, everything seemed to fade away. Victoria took my hand and said softly, "Eleanor, you saved the children. You are their hero." I smiled weakly, but inside, I didn't feel like a hero. I was just a grandmother, a mother, trying to protect what little was left of my family. The truth, however cruel, had finally come to light. Several months have passed since the trial, and my two grandchildren's lives and mine have slowly found a new rhythm in Charleston. I rented a small apartment near the central square, where every morning the church bells ring as clear as a peaceful melody, pulling me out of nightmares about Chloe and Cortez. The apartment isn't large, just a small living room, a kitchen nook, and 2 narrow bedrooms. But for me, it's a sanctuary, a new home for Sophia and Leo. Every morning, I wake up early and make breakfast. An egg sandwich for Leo, cookies and milk for Sophia. I comb Sophia's hair, straighten the collar of Leo's uniform, and walk them to the elementary school near St. Francis Church. Seeing them run into the classroom, waving at me with a radiant smile, I feel a spark of hope sneak into my heart, even though the pain still burns like an open wound. One afternoon, while watering some chrysanthemum pots on the balcony, a yellow taxi stopped in front of the building. The door opened, and Ben got out, a travel bag over his shoulder, his shirt wrinkled from the long journey from Denver. My son was visibly thinner, his face gaunt, his eyes sunken as if they carried a story too heavy to bear. I dropped the watering can. Water splashed on the floor, and I ran to hug him. "Ben, you're back," I exclaimed, my voice choked, holding him tightly as if I feared he would vanish, just like those peaceful days that were gone. Ben hugged me back, then knelt and opened his arms as Sophia and Leo ran from inside the house, shouting excitedly. "Daddy! Daddy!" They threw themselves into his arms with laughter. And in that moment, I saw Ben's eyes light up, if only for a second. That night, the 4 of us sat around the small table in the kitchen. I made the chili that Ben had loved since he was a child, the aroma of corn and spices filling the house with warmth. Sophia told stories from school, and Leo showed off a drawing his teacher had praised. But the atmosphere was still heavy, as if we all knew there was an unspoken topic, something that had to be said. After clearing the dishes, I sent the children to their room to play with puzzles and sat down across from Ben. "Son, I have to tell you everything," I said in a grave voice, clasping my hands to stop them from shaking. I began to speak slowly. From that afternoon at Arthur's dry cleaners, when I received the coat and discovered the plastic bag with the transfer receipt and the photo of Sophia and Leo marked with a red circle, I told him about the overnight bus ride, about the safe under the dresser, about the plane tickets to Madrid without his name on them, and about the trial where the atrocious truth about Chloe and Cortez was revealed. Every word was like a stab, not just for me, but for Ben's heart as well. He remained silent, running his fingers through his messy hair, his eyes red, and when I told him the part where Chloe called the children merchandise to negotiate with, Ben slammed his hand on the table and his voice broken said, "Enough, Mom." He stood up and began pacing in the small room, as if he couldn't bear the weight of the truth. "Mom, the truth is, I've suspected Chloe for a while now," Ben said, his voice full of anguish. "She used to leave early and come back late. She would hide her phone, and suddenly large sums of money would disappear from the house. I would ask her, but she always said it was for work. I didn't want to believe she could do something wrong. I thought I was protecting the family, but it turns out I was just a fool." He stopped, turned his face away, his shoulders shaking. I stood up, took my son's trembling hand, saying nothing, just silently sharing his pain. I knew Ben's suffering wasn't just from his wife's betrayal, but also from the feeling of helplessness at not being able to protect his 2 children. Sophia and Leo came out of their room silently, as if sensing the tension in the air. Sophia was hugging her yarn doll and asked quietly, "Grandma, is Daddy sad?" I nodded, pulling her closer and putting another piece of meat in her bowl. "Daddy is just tired from the trip. Eat up." Leo joined the conversation with an innocent voice. "Daddy, can we play with Legos tomorrow?" Ben smiled weakly and stroked his head. "Yes, we'll play tomorrow." But I knew that smile was nothing more than a mask to hide his broken heart. After dinner, when the children were in their room, Ben sat next to me and said firmly, "Mom, I'm filing for divorce. I'm going to get full custody of the children, and with you, I'm going to build a new life for them." I looked at him and saw in his eyes a determination I hadn't seen in a long time. "Are you sure, Ben?" I asked, my voice trembling. He nodded, squeezing my hand. "I can't forgive her, Mom. It's not for me. It's for Sophia and Leo. They deserve a safe life, and I will do everything to make them happy." I nodded, tears in my eyes. At last, my son had found the courage to face the truth, even though it hurt so much. That night, I stood on the balcony, looking at the dimly lit street. The yellow light from the lampposts cast flickering shadows. From inside the house, Ben's voice reading stories to the children mixed with the pure laughter of Sophia and Leo. And then the teddy bear said, "I'm not afraid of the dark anymore." Ben read, and I heard Leo exclaim, "What a brave teddy bear." The sound of pages turning added to the atmosphere, bringing a fragile but priceless peace. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and felt a little warmth return to my heart. Time passed quietly. The small apartment I had rented truly became a home, where little by little, the wounds of 3 generations began to heal. The court had already made its final ruling, granting full custody of Sophia and Leo to Ben and me. Hearing the news, I sat on the sofa, clutching a hot cup of tea, feeling as if the heavy weight that had been crushing my chest was finally lifted. Every Sunday morning, I took Sophia and Leo to the nearby park. The bells of St. Francis Church rang, mingling with the singing of birds in the trees. Ben, who now had a stable job in Charleston, would play football with Leo on the green grass. The boy, with his short little legs, would run after the ball, smiling from ear to ear. "Dad, kick it hard." Meanwhile, Sophia would happily ride her tricycle around the fountain, her high ponytail waving in the wind. I sat on a bench, savoring a hot cup of coffee, watching the 3 of them play under the Sunday. The light filtered through the leaves, scattering golden flecks on the ground, and in that moment, I felt a peace I had never felt before, as if the storm had passed and the sky was finally clear again. One afternoon, the whole family went to the market in the central square. The air was filled with the aroma of grilled hot dogs and fresh fruit. Sophia, her eyes shining, chose an old comic book for herself at a bookstall, eagerly flipping through each page. "Grandma, this one has a princess who rides a dragon," she exclaimed, showing me the book. I smiled and stroked her head. "You chose well. I'll read it to you tonight." Leo, on the other hand, insisted on a superhero-shaped balloon, pulling on Ben's shirt. "Dad, buy it for me. Superheroes fly really high." Ben laughed, pulled out his wallet, and paid, while I quietly chose the freshest bunches of vegetables, some bright red tomatoes, and a bag of corn to make chili. These simple moments, like small pieces of a puzzle, were slowly putting the family that seemed to have been broken back together. In the apartment, I taped Sophia's and Leo's clumsy drawings to the living room wall. There was one with 4 people, me, Ben, Sophia, and Leo holding hands under a red roof, with a big sun and a few white clouds. Sophia pointed to the drawing, proud. "This is our house, Grandma. I chose the red roof because it's my favorite color." I looked at the picture with a soft smile, but I felt a lump in my throat. Their mother wasn't in the drawing, and I knew that no matter how hard I tried, that emptiness would always be there. I just hoped that Ben's love and mine would be enough to fill a little of that void in the children's hearts. Sometimes, I would see Chloe's picture in the newspapers, usually in short articles about the case, accompanied by a photo where she looked gaunt and lifeless behind bars. Every time it happened, I would hide the paper, burying it at the bottom of the trash can, not wanting Sophia or Leo to see it. They were too young to understand, and I didn't want their pure smiles to be stained by a cruel truth about their mother. but I knew that one day I would have to tell them. I would have to explain why she was no longer there. That thought made me shudder, but I repeated to myself that when the time came, I would find a way for them to understand without that pain destroying them. At night, when Sophia and Leo were fast asleep, I would sit at the kitchen table and open the old journal I had started writing in my first days in Charleston. My hand, now less shaky, would glide over the pages, leaving these words. Today, Sophia drew a family. She doesn't know that this red roof is all we have, but I will do whatever it takes to make sure it always stands strong. They will grow up surrounded by love and truth, not lies or fear, and never again will anyone dare to use a red pen to mark their faces. I closed the notebook. I turned off the light, leaving only the sound of my two little angels' quiet breathing in the next room, and the soft murmur of the night wind coming through the window. Sometimes, in my dreams, I still see Chloe's image, not the one from the courtroom, but the one of that young woman who one day timidly entered my house, with a bouquet of daisies in her hand and a nervous smile. I wake up, and the tears fall silently, not out of nostalgia, but from the pain of a betrayed trust. But then I hear Sophia calling me cheerfully from the living room, or Leo's mischievous laughter as he plays with his dad, and I know I can't let the past drag me back down. I wipe my tears. I get up and prepare a new day for my little family. One night, after reading a story to my two grandchildren, Ben stayed with me in the living room. "Mom, I found a steady job here," he said, his voice deep but firm. "I want to stay in Charleston, raise the kids with you. We'll make it, right?" I looked at my son and saw in his eyes a determination I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "Of course, we will, son," I replied, taking his hand. "We'll make it, because we have each other." Ben smiled, and for the first time in many months, that smile was no longer heavy with burdens. In the darkness, as the streetlight filtered through the slits in the curtains, I understood that my family, after the storm, had truly been reborn. It was a painful rebirth, built on the broken pieces of trust and love, but it was full of hope. I got up, went out onto the balcony, and looked at the quiet street. The church bells rang in the distance, like a reminder that, no matter how cruel the past had been, we, me, Ben, Sophia, and Leo would keep moving forward, with love as a beacon lighting the way. In the depths of my heart, I understood that everything that happened wasn't just my family's tragedy, but also a warning to everyone. Sometimes, the person who hurts you is precisely the person you trusted the most. Naivety, blind faith, can become the open door for darkness to enter. But I also understood that the love and courage of a mother, of a grandmother, always have the strength to protect and guide. I want to tell everyone something. Learn to look closely at the strange signs. Don't close your eyes for fear of facing the truth. A family is only truly preserved when we have the courage to defend it with all our hearts and with firmness, even in the face of the most painful betrayal. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell it to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I truly wonder. If you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to keep the peace? Or would you have the courage to face it all to reclaim your own voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for another. God always blesses, and I am sure that bravery will lead us to better days. For now, on the end screen, I will leave two of the channel's most beloved stories. I think you will be surprised. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.